So on behalf of the Schiller Institute, my name is Dennis Speed. I want to welcome everybody here today. We have a greeting to the conference I'll begin with, which is from the Chinese Chamber of Commerce of New York. It says, "Dear friends, on behalf of everyone at the Chinese Chamber of Commerce, I extend a warm greeting to all in attendance at the Schiller Institute conference. I truly believe the scientific triumphs of the past century and the advancements in technology were not through sheer luck or chance. Rather, I believe it is the collective efforts of our species as a whole that allow us to grow and prosper beyond what we could ever accomplish as individuals. Only through cooperation between all nations can we all achieve a greater goal." The Conference of the New Silk Road becomes the World Land Bridge. We'll discuss issues including the designs for the development of Southwest Asia, as well as a path for United States recovery. We sincerely wish the conference will be very successful and the attendees have a wonderful stay in New York City. Sincerely, Justin Yu, Chairman of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce of New York City. I just want to say a couple of things in welcome. Of course, what's referred to in the statement in specific is the New Silk Road becomes the World Land Bridge, the report that was done at the end of 2014 by the Schiller Institute. And I think everybody has our program, so you have the list of our speakers. And I just want to say the following in setting us off. You know, New York City was founded by Alexander Hamilton and George Washington. I'm not talking about the chronological founding, but the fact that as an American city, it was founded on the principle of a single unified government. Hamilton's role with George Washington in the first American presidency was a revolutionary one, which was more important than the victory on the battlefields of Trenton, Saratoga, and Yorktown. His 4 documents on the National Bank, the constitutionality of the National Bank, the nature of credit, and the nature of manufactures are the basis for the real United States. It is that real United States that the Schiller Institute seeks to place back on the world stage in collaboration with particularly the nations of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa in the pursuit of the policy called the World Land Bridge. The danger of warfare, which now lurks and pulsates from a collapsed transatlantic system, is what brings us here today in part. And the Schiller Institute has been doing conferences in Egypt, it's spoken at conferences in Russia, in India, and many other locations in the past weeks. And in that light and in that context, I'd like to go directly to introduce the person who has campaigned tirelessly for this policy. Together with her husband, Lyndon LaRouche, back in 1989, the glimmer of this policy was first enunciated as the Eurasian Land Bridge, shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall. In 1996, in June, a conference was held in Beijing, which put the idea of the New Silk Road on the map. And at that conference, the founder of our organization spoke, and that conference basically precipitated what then became known as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Many other things occurred. And now, in this stage, we are at the point where if our speaker, keynote speaker, is listened to, there's a world that can be made, can be created of cooperation and not destruction. It's always my honor and pleasure to introduce the chairman and founder of the Schiller Institute, Helga Zepp LaRouche.
Well, dear guests and friends of the Schiller Institute, this conference is taking place at a very serious moment, and it has no lesser goal than that which has been defined by my husband, Lyndon LaRouche, with the Manhattan Project, that we have to turn the United States back to its founding principles. We have to get the United States away from its present imperial orientation and the idea that it must pursue a unipolar world and turn it back to the identity of a republic, as the founding fathers and the Constitution designed it. This goal is something which almost the whole world thinks is impossible. I can assure you that outside of the United States, the thinking people think the United States is hopeless. And I can assure you that that is a very common feeling. Many people don't travel to the United States anymore because they think it has become a place of horror. Yet, achieving this goal to turn the United States back into a republic is going to determine, in all likelihood, the fate of the entire human species. There is right now an absolutely eerie tension in the air, because many people who not always say it, but know it, that we are right now closer to World War III than even at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis. This has been stated by military analysts, and nevertheless, there is no peace movement. There is nobody in the street talking about the fact that we are close to World War III. In the 80s, you had hundreds of thousands of people marching in the streets of Germany against the SS-20 and the Pershing II. Today, where the situation is more dangerous, and experts have described that if there would be an incident, the warning time to launch general thermonuclear war would be 3 to 6 minutes. So only few people are speaking about that, while the vast majority of citizens in the United States and Europe is marching like lemmings towards the cliff. I want to highlight a case of a 78-year-old pensioner, a retired teacher from the German city of Kaiserslautern, who 2 days ago just was denied his suit in the third level of the Federal Administrative Court in Leipzig, where he tried the third time to sue the German government for allowing the United States to use the airbase in Ramstein for a relay system of the drones, without which the drones could not be sent to the Middle East and elsewhere. That this would be against the German Constitution of Germany, which does not allow that Germany would ever again launch a war of aggression or help other countries to do so. The judges ruled again that matters of international law can only be taken up by states and not by individuals. But this pensioner of 78 years old is planning to take this to the highest constitutional court in Karlsruhe. One is almost reminded of the story in the Old Testament where God was about to punish Sodom and Gomorrah for their sinful behavior, and was then convinced that there would be only 10 just men, the punishment would be not carried out. And one almost asks, are these 10 honest men to stand up there today? Let me, before I come to the solution, how we get out of this crisis, look at the very dire strategic situation. We are now having 12 days of joint military drills involving the US and the Philippines, Australia and Japan. The exercise is called Shoulder to Shoulder, and for the first time ever, the US Defense Secretary Ash Carter will go there to be on the place next week. Now, yesterday, Ash Carter just said that the enemies #1 of the United States are first Russia, second China, third Iran, fourth North Korea, and fifth, oh yeah, there was terrorism. So parallel, you have the largest ever US-South Korean military exercises until late April, also involving many troops. And the Philippine exercises is including an amphibious landing exercise to simulate taking one of the disputed islands in the South China Sea. The Philippine military also is sending a US high mobility artillery rocket system designed to shoot down aircrafts. And basically, it's the first time that these exercises include Australia and Japan in the effort to build a quadrilateral military counter alliance to China. Now, other things are taking place in the region. 2 weeks ago, the Philippines allowed the United States to have access to 5 of its bases near the disputed waters in the South China Sea, and they renewed the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Now, this is against the Philippine Constitution, but they bypassed it by allowing the US troops within Philippine bases so that the Constitution would not apply. Now, also Japan has a new national security law which went into effect last Tuesday, where the National Diet passed a new security bill breaking away from the pacifist constitution of Japan in order to enhance the alliance with the United States and with it the power to exercise the right for collective self-defense. Now, the whole world watches. Does that mean Japan is going to go back to its military past? There is a tendency in Japan right now to move into alliances with other claimants of the contested territories to contain Beijing. Now, where is all of this leading up to? China's position concerning the waters are written in what they call the 9-dash line in the South China Sea. And China claims that these are territories which historically belong to China, including the right to reclaim land and build bases on the Spratly Islands. China also says, and that is true, that this does not represent a violation of the freedom to the seas, but it will just improve the living conditions of the people living there, give better ways to protect against pirates, and it does not hinder the passage of other ships. Now, the Philippines in 2013 filed a case in the International Court in Den Haag, insisting its right to exploit the South China Sea waters in its 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone as defined in the UN Convention on the Laws of the Sea. China did not accept to be in this case, which is their perfect right to do, but is questioning the legitimacy of the case. The court should have at that point abandoned the case, but they accepted it, and the ruling is expected for end of April, beginning of May. The Chinese Defense Ministry said that they have the absolute right to then declare an air defense identification zone. Now, at the nuclear summit in Washington, which just took place, President Xi, in a discussion with President Obama, told Obama that China would not accept any behavior in disguise of freedom of navigation that violates its sovereignty in this region. 1 day later, exactly 1 day later, the United States announced a new patrol near the disputed islands in the South China Sea. And Navy officials announced that they plan to conduct more and increasingly complex exercises in the future. So the United States is playing a chicken game against China, increasing the tension over violations of opposite claims in the forefront of the Den Haag ruling to create an atmosphere that then they hope China would not dare to set up an ADIC. But China already said that it will defend its rights in the South China Sea. So the question is, could there be a war between the US and China over some relatively worthless rocks and reefs in the ocean? Could it be that the United States goes to a war with China on the Philippines' behalf? Obviously, the South China Sea is of geographical significance for China, but the interest of the United States is geopolitical. And it is the same reasoning like in the TPP to affirm the right to set the rules in Asia. The United States insists that they will defend a unipolar world, that they are the only superpower, and that they will not allow any other nation to meddle in that. The claim that Russia is only a regional power, which Obama did, is very absurd, given the fact that Russia has a nuclear arsenal, which is a complete strategic match to that of the United States. And Putin just demonstrated very brilliantly a military flank in Syria against ISIS, that Russia is absolutely needed if you want to have political solutions. Russia played a positive role in the P5+1 negotiations with Iran and is now helping to end and making possible the end of the war in Syria. There are many leaders in the world who have said, without Russia, you cannot solve existential problems like terrorism, ISIS, the refugee crisis in Europe. And one should also be reminded that these territorial disputes in the South China Sea are the result of the imperial intention dating back to the Versailles Treaty and the Paris Peace Conference in the aftermath of that in 1919, whereby the former German colonies in the Pacific Islands, north and south of the equator, were given in part to Japan, which at that time caused a tremendous feeling of injustice in China, leading to the May 4th movement. And all the people in China thought the Versailles Treaty was a complete fraud. And as we know from European history, it laid the seeds for World War II. Now, the same game was repeated in the San Francisco Peace Conference after the Second World War, where John Foster Dulles arranged for China to be excluded, despite the fact that China had the highest casualty rate in Asia against the Japanese and fought the longest. But the Western powers drew the map in Eastern Asia without China, and John Foster Dulles deliberately declared certain Asian frontier territories without owners, an old imperial trick to manipulate then future conflicts, as was the case with the Sykes-Picot Agreement for Southwest Asia or the 1919 Trianon Treaty for the Balkans. The fact is that the unipolar world has already ceased to exist. It is a fact China is rising, the United States is losing its hegemony. China is already exporting much more technologies than the United States. It is educating far more scientists, engineers, and the word in the science community internationally is, if you want to get anything done in frontier science, the place to go is China. So China, except a couple of minor corrections in its stock market, is doing very, very well economically. And do not believe what the New York Times is trying to tell you every day. Because China has embarked in the policy of the new Silk Road, the maritime Silk Road, the One Belt, One Road policy, a huge infrastructure project to connect all the countries of Eurasia through infrastructure development and high technology investments. It is so attractive that already 60 nations are cooperating with China. It has created, together with other BRICS countries, a completely alternative economic system, the AIIB, which has immediately had 60 founding members, despite the United States making enormous pressure on everybody not to join it. The New Development Bank, which is already operating this year, the new Silk Road Fund and Maritime Silk Road Fund, and many other such institutions. There is a tremendous attractiveness of this program of a new Silk Road in the spirit of the ancient Silk Road in all of Asia, who are now all talking about to increase Asian connectivity. The investment of these new banks is going exactly in the areas which were denied for decades by the IMF, the World Bank, namely in infrastructure, and all of these countries are thirsty and hungry for exactly these kinds of developments. Many countries have expressed recently interest to become transport hubs for the new Silk Road and the maritime Silk Road. Indonesia wants to become a hub, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Iran. The new Silk Road is moving very, very rapidly in all of Eastern Europe. Just now, when President Xi Jinping was in Prague on a state visit to the Czech Republic, President Zeman praised the new Silk Road and emphasized the role of Prague, the golden city, to be the gateway between Europe and China. The 16+1 countries just met in Riga, and they also, this is the 16 East European and Central European countries, all want to be connected to the One Belt, One Road policy. So this is moving very, very positively. If you contrast that with the transatlantic sector, the too big to fail banks, Wall Street and London, which are completely bankrupt, and we are in front of an immediate financial crash, much, much worse than what happened in 2008, where the entire 2 quadrillion outstanding derivatives could blow up any minute. Furthermore, the so-called tools of the central banks no longer function. As a matter of fact, every time a central bank now does something to correct the problem, it boomerangs and has the opposite effect. Like in the case of the Bank of Japan, Norway, or the EZB, when they go to zero interest rate or even negative interest rate, it furthers the deflationary collapse instead of stimulating the real economy. Now, how desperate the situation in the transatlantic system is, you can see by the fact that the head of the European Central Bank, Draghi, is now talking about helicopter money. Now, that is, if you remember, an invention of Ben Bernanke, the idea that in order to avoid a meltdown of the entire financial system, you just fly helicopters over cities who throw down money as much as it is needed to prevent a meltdown. Now, this obviously has caused a complete uproar in Germany because people in Germany remember what the hyperinflation of 1923 was all about. Then look at the condition of Europe, the refugee crisis, which is, and that is not being discussed much, but a reality, the result of the wars conducted mostly by the United States and the British in the Middle East, wars which were all based on lies. Iraq, no weapons of mass destruction. The war against Libya was, initiated by a lie in the UN Security Council that it would not be a war. Look at Afghanistan. Was the September 11 really as it was presented? Look at the situation in Yemen and in many African states. The refugee crisis, which is the biggest humanitarian crisis probably since the end of the Second World War, unbelievable fates of people, has revealed that there is no European Union, because there is no union, there is no unity, there is no solidarity. You have now a situation where children are stuck in barbed wires and police is shooting at them, trying to get them back. And then there was this absolutely shameful deal between the EU and Turkey, Turkey, which according to documents just delivered to the UN Security Council, is still supporting ISIS. Now, in Germany, politicians saying, oh, now we have fewer refugees. Yeah, but on what price? They're being deported Grenzscale from intern camps in Greece. It is a complete disgrace. Even the UN's Human Rights Commission said this is a complete violation of human rights. It violates the Geneva Convention on Refugees, and all the aid organizations have already left their job because they say under these conditions they cannot do it, like the Doctors Without Borders and many others. So the world is clearly in a complete mess and disintegration condition. And what is the answer of the leading institutions of the transatlantic sector? Well, they pulled just now a big rabbit out of the hat called the Panama Papers. Now, 1 year ago, an anonymous source, which is always dubious, gave to the Süddeutsche Zeitung 11.5 million documents which contain 40 years of data concerning a firm in Panama called Mossack Fonseca, which specializes in letterbox firms for the purpose of tax evasion. Now, then the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists deployed for 1 year 400 reporters in 80 countries, financed by whom? By George Soros, and then targeting politicians, industry leaders, and sportsmen and others. Immediately, naturally, the focus was on Putin. Even so, his name is nowhere to be found in these documents. And Xi Jinping. The New York Times did not waste a day since the beginning of this of Xi Jinping. Now let's look at this operation. What is this? Jürgen Mossack, one of the founders, his father was a member of the Hitler Waffen-SS. Ramon Fonseca Mora was the other guy was the ex-president of the Panameñista, the party, a party founded by the open Hitler supporter Arnulfo Arias Madrid, and the son was actively involved in the overthrow of General Noriega. Now, the old Sack offered was a member of the Nazi Waffen-SS and then offered his services after the war to the US government as an informant. Now, that is entirely the profile of the Dulles brother famous Red Line, by which they transported Nazis from Germany via the so-called Red Line to South America to deploy them there for other purposes. Now, the focus on Xi Jinping is obviously especially ridiculous, because if there is one political leader in the world who is conducting an anti-corruption campaign in a completely ruthless fashion, then it is him. So what is the purpose of this? Obviously, it's part of the present transatlantic hybrid warfare against Russia and China, with the aim to have regime change by a variety of means, by color revolutions, by NGOs which are financed from foundations which are probably in this tax-exempt scheme, sanctions, and now the Panama Papers. Obvious hope to steer an uproar among their own populations, and it almost worked in the case of the Icelandic president, where now people are in front of the residence of President Gunnar Hauksson. But, you know, the MO of this is really not a new one. The way how this has been functioning for a very long time is you use certain assets owned by the governments or secret services and allow criminal operation and behavior to go on for a very long time. And then at a convenient moment, you blow it up and you cause a shake-up. Now, this was done very efficiently in the 1990s in Italy with an operation called Clean Hands, where you had a national juridical investigation into political corruption, and then they blew it all up, and it caused the end of the so-called First Republic of Italy. because, all the parties got involved. And, everybody who ever traveled to Italy knows that the entire post-war system of Italy was based on a principle called amici di amici. You may not approve of it, but that was that, you couldn't get a job done without some kickback. Public works would always have some, bribes. And it was called, the whole operation was called Tagentopolis, or in English, Bribesville, meaning this kickbacks for public work. In Italy, it involved at that time 5,000 public figures, half of the Italian parliament, more than 400 city and town councils were dissolved, and the annual bribe rate in the 90s was estimated to be $4 billion. Now, Bloomberg recently reported that the Brazilian anti-corruption campaign against Dilma Rousseff, one of the BRICS leaders, is based on the Italian model. It's called Operation Car Wash. So what they do is they operate with a system of plea bargains, turn mafia bosses into snitches, and that way you can roll up the whole political system. Now, what comes out there is very interesting because it reveals the total criminal character of the entire transatlantic financial system. In the case of the Mossack Fonseca, which is only the fourth largest of such firms, so one has to assume that there are many, many more such cases, it turns out that the Hongsheng Bank Corporation is responsible for 20% of these letterbox firms, and then come UBS, Union Bank of Switzerland, Credit Suisse. Almost all the German banks are involved. So what do you do when you have such a problem? The only solution to stop this is obviously what Franklin D. Roosevelt did in 1933. When he declared Glass-Steagall, the separation of the banks, by simply bankrupting the fraudulent parts, and that is exactly what is required today, that you need to separate the banks, protect the commercial banks, and close down the derivatives, the toxic waste paper, and then you need a Pecora commission to look into who committed what crime and for what purpose. Now, the funny thing is that when the British cabinet member Osborne was asked, what about the fact that the father of Cameron is also now a target in the Panama Papers, he said, oh, that is a private matter. So, it is quite amazing what nerve these people have. So the FDR solution for the United States. Then we need to put down all of these crises. And, I think it is absolutely feasible, but one has to go the path as it was now demonstrated by the negotiations between Secretary of State Kerry and Foreign Minister of Russia Lavrov in the case of Syria. There has to be a political agreement, but then you need a huge development program. You need to do exactly what President Xi Jinping offered when he was in Iran, namely to extend the new Silk Road, the One Belt, One Road policy into the entire Middle East. Because you will not stop terrorism by throwing more bombs. You will, if you throw more drones and more bombs, for one killed terrorist, you will create 100 new ones who hate the West even more than before. So this is no solution. Obviously, ISIS has to be fought and has to be gotten rid of, but you need a development perspective for the entire region, from Afghanistan to the Middle East, to the Mediterranean, from the Caucasus to the Persian Gulf. And we need to have a war on the desert. We have to have new fresh water, which is eminently possible with peaceful nuclear energy and desalination of large amounts of ocean water. You need new cities, agriculture, industry, so that the people of Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and Yemen and Tripoli Libya, and many, many African countries, that they have a future. Why can we not take the offer of Xi Jinping to enter a win-win cooperation with the large neighbors of the Middle East, Russia, China, India, Iran, Egypt, and build up the Middle East, in a Marshall Plan, new Silk Road fashion. The only reason why I'm mentioning Marshall Plan is because it reminds people that you can rebuild war-torn regions with a crash program. I know that China doesn't want to use this word because the Marshall Plan has such a Cold War connotation, but we need to have a new Silk Road perspective. Now, the same goes obviously to settle the Ukraine crisis. Now, you probably heard that yesterday the Dutch people voted on a referendum against the EU agreement of the EU association agreement for Ukraine. Now, this is very, very good because it means that this horrible EU is one step further to its dissolution. Because if you remember, it was the EU association agreement which was supposed to be signed by Yanukovych in late 2013 in the summit in Vilnius, the whole Ukraine crisis. Because Yanukovych in the last moment realized that it would have totally given the territory of Ukraine access for NATO. It would have totally made possible economic warfare against Russia because of the border and the agreements between Ukraine and Russia. So he did not sign it in the very last moment. And then you had the color revolution, the Maidan, all of these things developed. And if you look at the chronology of these events, it was not Russia acquiring the Crimea. Russia in every single instance reacted to a provocative action by NATO and by the EU, including a fascist coup in February 2014. So if you want to solve this problem now, well, this is now the ideal moment because the EU association agreement just detonated and it cannot be implemented, even if only 32% of the Dutch voted on it, with 64% in favor. The government in Holland does not dare to go along with it because there are many people in the 70% who did not vote who don't like the EU, because remember that Holland and France were the only two countries who voted against the EU constitution in 2005. So the ferment against this dictatorship which the EU has become is just too big, and the lament today in the European media about the failure of this agreement is just absolutely loud and noisy. Okay, let's use this situation where, and if there's one veto, this agreement cannot go through. Let's use it to say, stop the confrontation with Russia. Extend the European Union and the Eurasian Economic Union of Russia into one Eurasian area from the Atlantic to the Chinese Sea. Let's extend the One Silk Road perspective to include Ukraine and develop it, because Ukraine is economically absolutely finished. The people are living a horrendous life as the result of what happened in the last 3 years. So let's do the same thing for Africa. Do people really think that we can sit there and the 1% of the rich become richer and richer by means which we now get a better window into the Panama Papers, and the majority of people lose everything? The middle class becomes the poor have shortened lives, the gap between rich and poor worldwide is becoming bigger and bigger, and 1 billion people goes hungry every day. Klaus Schwab, the director of the Davos Economic Forum, a couple of months ago said that if the present trends do not change, it is to be expected that 1 billion people will come as refugees to Europe in the next years. Well, if it comes to that, and you have the effort to use NATO and Frontex military ships and shoot at the refugees to try to deter them, what remains then of the European values? What about our humanism? What about any value? So why don't we take the new Silk Road and say, well, we have now a very attractive economic model, which is already functioning very well in 60 nations of the world. And let's join hands, the United States and Russia and China and European nations, and develop Africa. This is the moment where we have to have a grand vision to change the plight of so many people. Now in Germany, there is one minister, the development minister, Gerd Müller, who traveled a lot in Southwest Asia and in Africa. And he is mentioning now, which is a big step forward, every time we need a Marshall Plan, we need to develop these countries, because otherwise they will bring all their problems to Europe. And let's convince Japan that it is not in their favor to have be drawn into military adventures against China. Japan is a country very much like Germany, which has almost no raw materials and achieved a very high living standard because of high rates in science and technology and exporting. And for Japan, the natural export market is all of Asia, is Africa, and they should be part of such a new world economic system and not go the way the Bank of Japan is now going, by going to zero interest rate, negative interest rate, and plunging deeper and deeper into the deflation. Now, the United States, is the United States so much above the need for a new Silk Road? I mean, if you travel through either the roads from Washington to New York or even on the roads in New York, I don't understand why the citizens are not in an uprising against these roads. I mean, they're so bad that the roads at the end of the GDR, East Germany, before it collapsed, they were smooth compared to what you have here. So, what the United States obviously would profit of is to join the new Silk Road, to build infrastructure. China built 20,000 kilometers of fast train system until the end of last year, and they plan to have 50,000 kilometers until the year 2025 or 30. In any case, in a very short period of time. And the United States has built how many kilometers or miles of fast train? 0. So what we propose is that the United States, rather than wasting its industrial capacity in an ever-growing military-industrial complex, trying to militarize the whole world, you can transform these industries and build fast trains, build maglev trains, or import the Chinese fast train system, which is excellent. It's smooth, it's quick, it doesn't shake at all like the European fast trains. So build 50,000 miles of fast train in the United States. Fight the desert in the southwest of the United States. Build a couple of new cities. The large parts of the United States are completely undeveloped. Basically, after Teddy Roosevelt, no new cities were built in the West. Build some smart cities, modern cities based on modular systems, but make beautiful cities. I mean, that would be a real challenge, to build beautiful cities and not more Houstons. So I may not. So we have put this program on the table. The new Silk Road must become the world land bridge. And the reason why we have proposed a development program for the entire world is because also multipolarity is not the answer to a unipolar world. Because the idea that you have multipolars, that you have groups of nations which still maintain their interest against other groups of nations, still has the seed of geopolitics. And geopolitics was what caused 2 world wars in the 20th century. And if we would come to a new world war it would be the annihilation of all of mankind, because the idea that you have a limited war somewhere in the Pacific or somewhere in Europe is complete bunk. And all the military experts we talk to, top-level military in Europe, the United States, and elsewhere, are convinced that it is the nature of the existence of thermonuclear weapons that it would come to a general global war if you start a war somewhere. Now, what we need to have is the replacement of geopolitics through a new paradigm. A new paradigm which must be as different as was the Middle Ages, separated from what is called modern times. The Middle Ages being scholasticism, superstition, flagellants, people just going crazy, believing in Aristotle. And when the Renaissance happened with Nicolaus of Cusa and some of the great thinkers of the Italian Renaissance, they designed a completely new paradigm, which defined the role of the individual in a completely different way. It established the sovereign nation state devoted to the common good for the first time. It made scientific and artistic progress possible in ways absolutely unknown before. And we need today a completely new paradigm. If we cannot lift our thinking above the present petty so-called self-interest, so-called national interest, or interest really of the big corporations and Wall Street, then we will not make it as a human species. What we need is an image of man, which is man as the only creative species in our knowledge so far. In the Chinese Confucian philosophy, there is the word or the notion of Ren, which is almost the same thing like in Christian humanism, the word of agape, of love. That you have to have a love and harmonious relation with your family, your neighbor, your nation, and the international community of nations. Now, the human species has come a very long way in a very short period of time. If you think about the last 10,000 years, we have produced quite a number of great minds. Confucius, Plato, Mencius, Nicolaus of Cusa, Kepler, Leibniz, Bach, Schiller, Beethoven, Tagore, Vernadsky, Einstein, just to name a few. And that is how people should be. Now you say these are people who are so extraordinary, they only come one in a century, but I don't think so. I think that if we go now for the kind of reform which we are talking about, and you would eliminate poverty, that no more child and no more person on the entire planet would be deprived of his or her basic needs. I think if you then give all the children of this planet a universal education, to give them access to the great discoveries of the past, that you teach them classical art, that you give them the kind of morality which used to be associated with Christian humanism, or with Buddhism, or with Confucianism, or other great cultures of this planet. Well, I think the elimination of hunger and poverty would do the best for human rights you can do, because being poor and being hungry does not allow you to exercise your human rights. So if we go in the other road and say, let's have a plan of global development, let's stop geopolitical wars, let's join hands to work together so that every child of the future can have a perspective to become a scientist, to become a teacher, an artist, to basically become an astronaut or some other beautiful thing developing the human mind. Then I think what we need is we have to go back to our own high traditions of our own cultures. The Americans have to become Republicans again, like Benjamin Franklin, or the founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Kennedy. I think in Germany, we need to go back to the German classics. In other nations, we have high points of culture which we have to revive. And then we have to relate to each other from the standpoint of the actual highest form of our culture and relate to the highest form of the culture of the other nation. And then we will have a human world. I think we should not give up on the idea that mankind is human. And that is what we have to fight for right now. So I think that if we do that, to speak in modern English, the new normal will be that every person will be a genius.
Thank you, Helga. In introducing our next speaker, I will have this to say. There was a time in the United States when the citizens of this country appealed to their government for justice, and their government would respond. This was the time of the Roosevelt administration of the 1940s and the time of the Kennedy administration of 1961 to 63. But how long ago was that? Next May, we will celebrate the 100th birthday of JFK. That's the last period, the 1960s, when the United States really was still a society striving toward justice, though it was a highly imperfect nation. Now, this man, whose humility is undeserved, is one of the last expressions of that time of justice. Whether we are talking about his protection of Martin Luther King in the march from Selma to Montgomery 51 years ago in Alabama, or his opposition to the Iraq wars of 1991 and 2003, his defense of controversial personages in his legal practice, or his speaking out in any case of injustice upon which his attention falls. He has distinguished himself by insisting on the truth. He still represents the idea of justice in the United States, and as with Socrates in Athens, as long as he is in the United States, and here in New York City in particular, the idea of justice is still alive in the United States. Please join me in welcoming to the podium former Attorney General of the United States, Ramsey Clark.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, what a good audience and gathering in the cause of peace and the elimination of poverty, and the address to the vast, true remaining challenges to humanity and living at peace together on Mother Earth. We're not very good children. We mistreat our mother in more ways than we really understand. Late last year, I flew from north to south in Korea and from north to south in Vietnam. And the devastation that was wreaked on those two countries in the last century is still so manifest You look at areas where Agent Orange was mindlessly deployed, and you have what could only be called a vast wasteland. More than a wasteland, it's not healthy to be there after all these years. The amount of money that we spent, the vastness of our national involvement in the project, if you want to call it that, and the death and destruction, both physically and not easily measured, but clearly morally as well. Is undeterminable. We have a vast challenge still in defining how and living by principles that will ensure peace. It will take us out of the laboratories where mad scientists are still trying to find better and more efficient means of mass destruction, where we have a society that's more interested in the welfare of our children than the status of our national defense, which is a corruption of the word defense, because it really implies just the opposite: the power to coerce others by the threat or use of superior technology and mass destruction, and superior forces committed to its deployment. The planet's still habitable in spite of our strenuous efforts, but if we keep on, we may wake up one morning and find that Mother Earth is sick, that we're the cause of the sickness, and that if we don't love our mama, we'll pay a heavy price. The challenge of addressing what is a crisis is really one of the happiest challenges that a population ever had. It ought to be a lot more fun than developing new technology for mass destruction, because it's how you not only preserve, but you improve the natural condition of the planet, a beautiful planet which offers peace and prosperity for all. And yet, because of our lusts and our conduct, still faces the possibility of mass destruction. It amazes me how science, I always enjoyed science, because I thought it was our effort to better understand all aspects of the not only global but planetary and interplanetary and environment in which we live. There's a great adventure still possible on this planet, and more interesting in a way at least in terms of its unknown aspects now, and a mastery of the universe beyond. But the biggest challenge we have is as simple as how to live together with love and affection and constructive conduct within our family and among our neighbors and across our nation, and most importantly of all, with peace and constructive interaction with all the other neighbors that share a planet that still remains preponderantly beautiful, but has growing wastelands because of our thoughtless and careless and dangerous abuse of what we call Mother Nature. We have the capacity to solve all of our problems. We engage more in creating problems, however, and with more of our resources and greater of our energies and sadly even aspirations, in how we dominate the globe by the threat and use of violence, which a loving people would have prevented and overcome long ago. But look at the size of the militaries. Look at the continuing investment in the discovery and creation sometimes of development and utilization by threat and by actual deployment of the means we now have of mass destruction. Military budgets abandoned and transformed into education and food production and housing and family protection in Asia and Africa and Latin America could transform the quality of life on the planet. And still we're spending billions on forms of violence and the threat of their use to cause others to act as we want them to in ways that are not good for their children or ours either. Until we violate what seems to be our major commitment to a superior capacity for violence, until we recognize its threat to our present and future, to our children, until we eliminate means of mass destruction and the will to tolerate them, to accept them as a presence in our midst, then we live in danger of the chance of our own conduct ending or vastly impairing the capacity for future generations to live in peace, with prosperity, and which doesn't mean too much, it means just the right amount to overcome our lust for acquisition and to enjoy the things that are really beneficial, really important, assuring the health and well-being and education of all children everywhere, all adults and senior folks like me everywhere. Employing our wits, such as they be, and our energies, which are clearly sufficient, if properly employed, to assure for every child born on earth health and education and the opportunity to fully develop all their potential for individual contribution to their own well-being and the well-being of their families and the well-being of the rest of us. Now that's a challenge you could really enjoy a lot more than working in the laboratory for the development of better technology for mass destruction. Even if that technology seems to be beneficial, but in fact is destroying the environment that is necessary for the continuation of life on the planet. If human nature likes challenges, and I have to admit to a great affection for challenges, they interest me more than anything else around, then we'll accept these challenges and we can overcome the suffering, the vast suffering that any travel through poverty in the United States itself, but vast parts of Africa and Asia and Latin America. If our real time and energies and desires are directed toward the quality of life, which means the quality of life of the planet as well as living creatures that are crawling around on it, we'll not only not become the first species to destroy itself and probably take most of the others with us. Maybe some new forms will come along that won't have such a lust for belligerency. We need to face why it is that we still have scientists spending billions on the search for better means of mass destruction, the manufacture of the technology that contains and can consume us with its product of mass destruction. When we're way behind on how we raise healthy and happy children and unified families, not only where we live, which is because of our affluence, not so much a challenge as it is in most parts of the world. We have an interest in a human interest, an important interest. It's essential to the future on the planet in ensuring health for all the children of the planet, most of whom have no insurance, either the corporate kind or just the human availability kind. They have mother love, but where mother's hungry and sick herself, her capacities are limited. And yet when you go around the world, you see a larger suffering than the size of those who are celebrating an excess of affluence. It's one of the most interesting challenges that humanity's ever had. One of the most difficult, certainly. One of the greatest, simply because of the numbers in the game today. But if we really enlist for the duration in a commitment to improving the quality of life globally for all people, in eliminating not only militarism, but the threat of all forms of violence toward humanity, the most dangerous of which may be not militarism now, but the threat to the environment. We have a beautiful planet. It was given to us free of charge, and it requires some tending. And yet what you could call in our system the profit motive not only pays no attention to the well-being of Mother Earth, but exploits her. Because the bottom line doesn't require you to invest in the preservation of the environment and the productivity of the soil, and above all, the knowledge, understanding, and commitment of the people to a life of freedom and peace on the planet. I travel too much for what a sane person wouldn't do it. And I don't travel to happy places very often. I may pass through the airport at Paris, but I'm on my way to Bangladesh or some place where the human condition is not acceptable, where mere safety itself is never secure, not to mention food and health care and education. We have a vast challenge. It's hard to imagine, though, a greater source of joy that people of conscience could have than putting their shoulder to the wheel to see that we are committed wisely and with sufficient knowledge to know the consequences of our acts to the preservation of life on the planet and the opportunity for all the children yet to come to enjoy it in a continually better condition than the condition in which we will leave it. Mother Earth has deep scars from our conduct, and you can see them in the cities and in the countryside of even the most prosperous nations. But you go to the continents where so many of the poor people live, to Africa and many parts of our own hemisphere, to parts of Asia, where vast millions and millions live without adequate health care, meaningful education, or decent housing, or even decent food. If you like challenge, then we live in the best of all times, because we have the greatest challenge and the clear potential to address and resolve all threats to the human condition on the planet. There's no need for children to die in infancy and live in malnutrition and die young, live with no peace and security, and yet it's a constant threat to major, if not most, of those of us who live certainly in the third world. And even here, even in a great city like New York, there are children raised in conditions of poverty and neglect that are unacceptable to a humane concern. Though the woods may be lovely, dark, and deep, we have promises to keep and miles to go before we sleep. But we need to recognize that we're on the road, that we're in a race between education and catastrophe, between the deployment of what education tells us is essential for life, human life on the planet, in the century just ahead. It won't be an easy time. We're pretty comfortable here, but if you look around, the real dangers are vast, and particularly in the environmental sector, we're losing ground. They're not recognized. And the people who endure the worst conditions are those with the least capacity to do anything about it. So it takes those with the greater capacity to come to the rescue of all of us. Because on this small planet, with its huge population now, we are literally in the same boat, brother. And as the old song went, when you shake one end, you're going to rock the other. So those of us here who have had such a unique opportunity for knowledge, for a life of peace, for the opportunity to see what's possible, we've got to put our socks up and enjoy the most important struggle that humanity has faced, and that is how to live in peace with a growing population that, until we understand its natural dimensions and adhere to them, are mastered. We ought to look forward to the challenge with joy. We're lucky to have important work. And all we have to do is recognize it, roll up our sleeves, and do it. This is the true joy of life, as Shaw said. It's being deeply involved in a cause that you yourself deem mighty, being fairly worn out before you're thrown on the scrap heap. The opportunity to help our children in a world that we've contributed to overcome the many challenges that exist, to live in a future of peace and plenty, where love permeates all the societies within themselves and among each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I think our next speaker may have some graphics that people may have to watch, so I just let some of the panelists know if you want to take seats in the front row, we could arrange that. China is becoming the United States of the 21st century. That is not China's fault. The United States could choose to be better. There is a win-win possibility, and China is leading the way to that win-win horizon. How they are doing that and what they propose to share with everyone is the subject of presentation and study that will now be offered. Please join me in welcoming Professor Li Zhiwang, School of Journalism and Communications of Tsinghua University, China's One Belt, One Road policy, and the World Land Bridge.
Respected Helga, thank you for your invitation, so I can share some of my study here with this distinguished group of participants. In China, it's difficult to host a meeting because if we want to organize a meeting like this, we have to pay the audience to come. Either in a kind of a meal, a free book, or cash. For students, I gave them grade A. For colleague like academic, I gave them a envelope filled with cash. But here I saw you paying money to listen to our speak. That's something that makes a big difference. So China and America could not become China-America. Big cultural difference. Okay, that's why China's Belt and Road does not include the United States as our partner. And I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes talk about the corridors which connect Belt and Road. What is Belt and Road? The full term is the Silk Road Economic Belt, starting from Xi'an, Xi Jinping's home province, through Xinjiang, through Central Asia, to Russia, to Europe. Another way is to West Asia. What is road? Road, Xi Jinping named it 21st Century Maritime Silk Road. And a moment ago, Helge talked about South China Sea potential war. Because China's worries, concern about this potential war in South China Sea, and worry about American Navy blockade of Malacca Strait, so China want to have a new maritime Silk Road, which will not pass through Malacca Strait. And as a result, China now is building 4 ports along Indian Ocean countries. One is the Chowpyeong port in Myanmar, the Chittagong port in Bangladesh, Colombo port in Sri Lanka, and Gwadar port in Pakistan. And so far, China has completed the construction of the port in Colombo, Sri Lanka, and also the Gwadar port in Pakistan. And China has just signed a contract by the CITIC Group of China, one of the largest financial group, to build the Jiaopyeong port and an additional special economic development zone, which will cost about 15 billion US dollars. And the Gwadar port and also the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which will, for the first phase of construction, will cost 46 billion US dollars, and the money already there. And this is just the brief description of next. Sorry, I cannot control this. I have this, but so that's 5 major points. First, where is the Asian Silk Road? And second, where are the Belt and the Road of the new Silk Road? And where are the corridors which connects Belt and the Road? And I proposed a cultural belt along with economic belt of the new Silk Road. And in conclusion, I will address some of the problem, challenge, and concern about this Belt and Road project. Next. And this is the Asian Silk Road. In China, it's a household word about Tang Seng or Xuanzang, who was a Tang Dynasty Buddhist monk. He traveled from Xi'an, Xi Jinping's home province, through Xinjiang and climb over Tianshan Mountains and walk into Uzbekistan, Tashkent, and Bukhara, Harazma, and through Afghanistan and through today's Pakistan and into India. And he spent something like 15 years on the road. And eventually he brought back 600 copies of Buddhist literature on by elephant and horses. And that's why Xinjiang was so Xi'an was so famous, because it has the oldest stupa or Buddhist pagoda built for this monk. And Xuanzang wrote a well-known famous book. It's called Travel to the Western region. Western region, it means the so-called Western Buddhist paradise. That is India or today's Pakistan, in Peshawar, in Swat, in that area in Taxila, and also in Afghanistan. And that is also now being designated as the hub of the Belt and the Road. And next. And since 1990, that is 26 years ago, I was at that time a young scholar of UNESCO Silk Road project. And I started my journey following the footsteps of Xuanzang of the Tang Dynasty. Since then, I've been traveling and writing on the Silk Road. as a journalist and also as a journalism educator. But unfortunately, in 1989, when UNESCO made the proposal of the Silk Road project with China, the United States and Britain withdrew from UNESCO in protest of UNESCO's Silk Road project. And UNESCO and the United States and Britain so far has not returned, come back to UNESCO as a full membership. Okay, next. And this that was a map drawn 26 years ago, 26 years ago. I traveled the routes which exactly are the Belt and Road drawn by Xi Jinping himself. The Maritime Silk Road and the Central Asia Silk Road and also the Far Eastern Silk Road. Next. And 17 years ago, I launched the School of Journalism at Tsinghua University. Tsinghua University, where Chinese President Xi Jinping got his bachelor degree and PhD degree. And I started the School of Journalism. And in the same time, I started teaching a course. It is called Writing, a Learning Caravan on the Silk Road. I've been taking my students, over 500 students, to this Asian borderland. Now we call it a Belt and Road regions or areas. Next. Next. And these pictures were taken over the last 2 years. Every year I took between 20 and 30 university students, and most of them were freshmen. And it's a freshman seminar traveling on the Silk Road and writing on the Silk Road. And we went to Outer Mongolia steppe, we went to Bukhara, Samarkand, Hiva. We went to the Tianshan mountain route by Xinjiang in Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. And also we went through Himalaya mountains, Karakoram mountain, and Hindu Kush mountains. Next. And in this winter vacation of a month ago, I took our student to Calcutta in Eastern India and also Bangladesh. And you will see the students, this is a really hard traveling class. The student was so tired. Day and night they spend on the bus. And, except me, I just took a watchful eyes of the driver. The Bangladesh driver was crazy, you know. So I have to talk to him constantly so he will not get to sleep like a student. Okay. Next. Next. And since we every day on the road, we spend over 10 hours in the bus and only 2 hours in the hotel. And so we use the bus, our classroom. I give lecture and I also hire some international scholar like this Canadian. I also give lectures along with me. Next. And early last year, I selected the 300 students' notes on the Silk Road and published this 2-volume book in Chinese language. It's 1,600 pages. So it spent my lifetime to translate it into English. Yes, next. And the second point is, where are the belt and the road? If you look at this is the economic belt from Pacific coastline of China through Xi'an, the Central Asia, the Xinjiang, one way through Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and to Russia, then to Germany. Another way is the so-called China-Pakistan economic corridor from Xinjiang through Karakoram Mountains, then all the way through Pakistan, northern Pakistan, through Khyber province, then Balochistan province, all the way to Gawada port, which is about 50 kilometers away from Iran, and about a one-night sail to the Gulf. And this is the maritime Silk Road. Maritime Silk Road because the Malacca China Sea and the maritime and the Malacca Strait, the potential war and blockade. So China want to build the Chowpyeong port in Myanmar, the Chittagong port in Bangladesh, the Colombo port in Sri Lanka, and the Gwadar port in Pakistan. And there's some problem in Chittagong in Bangladesh because India and Japan have been fiercely competing or even blocking China, and problem there. And that is the Northern Silk Road. This road, as in the book being sold in the lobby, you'll see about the new landscape or the land bridge by Helker Institute. They say that over 100 years ago, actually there already exists this land bridge of the Siberian Railway starting from Vladivostok to China and Manchuria and all the way to Moscow. That's the Northern Silk Road. Next. And the question is, okay, let's go back to the previous one. The problem is, if China only have parallel Belt and Road, it doesn't serve China economy very well. So Belt and Road must have connectivity. So China potentially has 3 corridors, connecting belt, economic belt, and the maritime Silk Road. One is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. That has been personally witnessed by Xi Jinping visit last April, and he witnessed the signing of the agreement. And the second one is China, India, Bangladesh, Myanmar corridor. But this one, India does not say anything agreeable. Because so far, Indian Prime Minister Modi, even though he personally has some good relation with Chinese leaders, but he never make any comment about the Belt and Road. And India, other politicians, particularly its media, are quite antagonistic about Belt and Road. And Bangladesh has gave some support. Originally, the Chittagong port construction has been assigned, and China has sent its construction team there. But according to India press report 2 months ago, it was certainly dismissed by the Bangladesh government. The Bangladesh government decided to cooperate with Japan to build a new port only 25 kilometers away from Chinese planned port in Chittagong. And India strongly against this Chittagong port, regarded as something in India's backyard. And so the third corridor is through the China-Tibetan Railway. The China-Tibetan Railway now has passed through Lhasa and comes close to Nepal. The end point now, the last station of the Tibetan Railway is Jakarta. Jakarta, which is about only 2 hours to Nepali border and the Indian border. And so China, in the next 5 years, state plan, is going to build 3 railway lines. To build a railway line all the way to 3 Nepalese cities. It's been reported openly, it's not secret. And so this could be a corridor to South Asia. Actually, 3 corridors are all coming to South Asia. Next. And this the connectivity, so I don't want to repeat. Next. Next, let's take a look of some of the pictures, what they look like. Next. First, we look at the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which is regarded as the bloodline of Belt and Road. About the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank, one of the Chinese officials the other day gave a lecture in my class, and he said that the actual members, the actual membership of this Asian Infrastructure Development Bank, actually there are only 2 members now in terms of the substantial agreement signed, that is China and Pakistan. But in fact, 60 countries have signed it. Actually, Britain got most of the investment. Yeah. And so let's look at how China-Pakistan economic look like. Next. It goes through the western part of Himalayan mountains. That is a Hindu Kush mountain and the Karakoram mountains. And China already built a highway in early 1970s. But China and Pakistan are planning to build a railway and a gas and pipeline along this highway, Karakoram Highway. And the Karakoram Highway, starting from China westernmost city, Kashgar, and now ends in Islamabad. But the corridor will further be extended through Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province and Baluchistan province all the way to Gwadar port. And there are some security issues here. We know that the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province used to be called the Northwestern Frontier Province, which we saw most of the Pakistani Taliban attack and terrorist attack happening there. And about the Baluchistan, there are also constantly terrorist attack. Just in January this year, some 14 policemen were killed by a bomb. And and Pakistan, in order to protect the Belt and Road project, has formed a new army. It is called the Army of Protecting China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. The government gave like $20 million a year budget, and with 12,000 military officers, veteran officers, and soldiers. And if any Chinese feel some danger, and he made a special phone call, the army would send a armed car and with armed soldiers to protect, escort, to give escort at any call, and any Chinese can enjoy that treatment. Next. And so the problem now that from Xinjiang to Pakistan, we have to build a railway through these snow mountains. Yes. And the picture was taken last August. It's not in the winter, in the summer. And the Chinese monk Xuanzang, with his elephant and horse, went through these mountains. Okay, let's look next picture. So in September last year, I took my student, went through this. But when we traveled on the ground, not look from the window of plane, on the ground, everything beautiful, just like summer, And this is the Indus River Valley. And Xuanzang and other Chinese Buddhist travelers travel along these ancient routes along Indus River. Next. And this is the custom on Pakistan side of China-Pakistan economic corridor. And I didn't see a single Pakistani car. All the trucks were from China. And they are carrying cement, steel, and all those infrastructure building material. Next. And actually in in the heartland of Karakoram Mountain, it used to be the Shangri-La of American tourists before 9/11. Before 9/11, we see in Pakistan also call this place a Little Tibet, because from many Tibetans used to live here, and they used to practice Tibetan Buddhism. Next, you see this is called a small, a mini Potala. Next, and in the palace of this mini Potala, we saw all the utensils, Tibetan style utensils. Now it's a Muslim area. Totally, 100% Muslim. Next. And that's the last king of this Shangri-La kingdom, Hongzha. Hongzha is now 72 or 73 years old, and he treated me and my student in his palace. But he lived in the snow mountains. Next. And by the Indus River on this high, huge rock, we found 12 Chinese characters. That is read 大卫史古卫龙金像秘密史句, translated into English. Ambassador Gu Weilong of Great Wei Dynasty today are traveling to the kingdom of Mimi on the official mission. Dawei, that is before Tang Dynasty. Dawei emperor and empress ordered the construction of Dunhuang, where I think I had visited there a few years ago. That is China's pearl of treasure, and the Dawei kingdom. And where was the Mimi kingdom? This is something. Mimi kingdom exactly is a Asian kingdom near Tashkent in Uzbekistan. That means in the ancient time, this area, this place, northern Pakistan and near Afghanistan, in Hindu Kush Mountain and in Karakoram Mountain, is the hub of Silk Road. If we go to South Asia, we travel to West Asia, we travel to China, we have to travel through this area. But this area is also, now that it has some terrorism attack. Next. And no, let it go back, yes. And I went to this village, and this village is, people say that they have the guest house of over 1,000 years ago. Ambassador Gu Weilong and Xuanzang of the Tang Dynasty stayed in the guest house behind that high building. And when I came here, the whole village turned out, including the women there. Despite the conservatism, all women, took off their veils and to receive me there. And next. And so I went to the guest house. I found this furniture. The furniture has this swastika. Swastika, that means the Buddhism, the symbol of Buddhism. The symbol of Buddhism. And that means, despite Islamism, totally Islamism now, but they have all this Buddhist furniture well preserved. Next. And so we moved further into the mountains, and we're followed by all our bodyguards. Next. And why we moved to this dangerous area? We want to look at this Buddhist statue on the cliff. And we know Bamiyang Buddha was destroyed by Taliban, Afghan Taliban. But here we still have this huge Buddha of Gupta period of India empire. Next. And that President Xi Jinping and the Pakistan president and Pakistan senator there last April, and Xi Jinping and the Pakistan president signed the historical agreement of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, marking the beginning of the construction of Belt and Road. And a week before Xi Jinping meeting with Pakistan president in Islamabad, Pakistani president invited me to give a lecture, telling him what is Belt and Road. So actually, I repeated what I told Pakistan president here today. Yeah, next. And after Xi Jinping's agreement with Pakistani president, so far China and Pakistan have already, signed all these so many agreements. And I have this map. The book is coming out. So, and most of the projects are about energy, like hydropower station, thermal power station, wind power station, solar power station. Because of the Snow Mountain, you saw along the Indus River and the Jhelum River, the branch of Indus River, they have the largest reserve of hydropower. And Pakistan, why Pakistan is so backward and so poor? I can give you an indicator. The average consumption of power of Pakistan is only 1/10 of Chinese average consumption of power. And so China now, if they don't have power, they don't have any economic growth and development. So most of these are power stations. Crucial part of infrastructure construction. And also water treatment, like in the province of Punjab. Punjab has over 100 million people. They don't have clean water. So last week, the environmental scientists in my university had a meeting with Pakistani ambassador and the governor of Punjab province. Our university decided to join the efforts of offering over 100 million Pakistani people clean drinking water for the first time, but that will take 10 years or 20 years to finish. Okay. Thank you. Next. And another corridor is China, India, Myanmar, Bangladesh corridor. That is the eastern part, going through eastern part of Himalayan mountains. Next. And so my colleague and I propose that we should make this point at the center, at the starting point for this corridor, so that could link western part and the also poor province in western China, linked to as part of Belt and Road. And this some figure very interesting. Along this corridor, there are a population of 2.86, almost 2.9 billion population along this corridor, taking account of 40% of the world's population, just along this corridor. But its GDP only accounts for 16% of the world global GDP, and its farmland only accounts for 9%. So it has to be developed. Next. But there is some difficulty because the border dispute with India, because of the this very primitive condition, living condition. You know that during the Second World War, China and the United States jointly built the Stevie, the Stevie, I don't know the English, how to pronounce it, the Stevie Highway, the Burma Highway. Burma Highway, yeah. That exactly this corridor goes, but it has to go through those mountains. Next. And this is Chittagong. The final stop will be, this corridor will stop at Chittagong. And Chittagong now it's among the top 100 ports in the world, but the water is only 9 meters deep, not deep enough, and only not well developed. Next. Okay, now I also propose a culture belt. And without a culture belt, China would look like a new colonialist. No big difference from the United States and Britain. Yeah. Okay. So next. Can you? Okay. Why I propose? What's the basis for culture belt along the Silk Road? Actually, all the British sources, academic sources in doing research about Silk Road, the American sources, Indian sources, and Chinese sources, they all have these sources in Chinese books by Fa Xian, by Xuan Zhang, by all these monks. They just like they are more accurate actually than Marco Polo records. Okay. Next. So from reading these ancient sources, documents, and also doing our own research, we found that we share more common things instead of difference. I see more identical instead of difference. Like India and China relation, actually, one of the three key elements of Chinese culture is Buddhism. Buddhism comes from India. And with Pakistan is the Muslim country, and China has 20 million Muslims. In Pakistan, just like in Xinjiang, in Gansu, in Ningxia, these Muslim and Qinghai Muslim provinces, very close to Pakistan. I regard it as resources for Belt and Road. No, I never regarded Muslim as something, bad elements and or some potential threat. That's why Pakistan actually, in Chinese mind and Pakistan mind, Pakistan and China are the closest ally. If China has one ally, that is Pakistan and no other country. That's totally different from American mentality in this regard. And also about this Buddhism linked by language, like with Central Asia, with Kyrgyz, China also has its own Kyrgyz autonomous region, and with Uzbek, we have our own Uzbek region, autonomous region, and with Tajik that is Iranian and speaking people. In China, we have our own Iranian language autonomous county in Tashkurgan, in the westernmost. So we share a lot of things in common. So if we utilize this common thing we shared, they could serve to build a cultural belt. Next. And Xi Jinping, in his official statement, that he wants to build a Silk Road. And he said that the top priority of China foreign policy is to build a community of common interest of neighboring country in China. That is being interpreted by some Chinese scholars that different from previous Chinese leadership. Previous leadership regarded China-America relation as top priority. But now we regard the building a community of common interest of Asian neighboring country as our top priority in foreign policy. And he also said it's a community of common fate. But in my study, I propose that the base for a community of common fate and a community of common interest should be a community of common value, a community of common security, and a community of common culture. A big culture, not small culture. Next. Last point is some problem, difficulty we are facing in construction of Belt and Road. We have 4 risks, basically. Go next. One risk, security risk, like what happened in Syria, in Iraq, in Libya. In Libya, when the French and America launched the war, China lost how much? 20 billion US dollars in Libya, and just withdraw 20,000 its workers just come back. In Syria, the same thing happened. In Iraq, the same thing happened. So we don't know what happened. Like this kind of thing will repeat, then China will suffer a lot. Who will protect China's investment in Belt and Road? America military forces is 6 times more than Chinese military spending. But America still, did not succeed in its Iraqi war and Afghan war. So China should never follow American step and follow American way of, doing things like. And China now is doing a good thing, that China now is taking a lead in inviting Afghan Taliban and Afghan government and the Pakistani government and Chinese government, the 4 sides sitting together to have talk. Last year, they have peaceful talk, political talk in Beijing, Urumqi, and later in Islamabad. And later, at the last point, the United States also joined. It became five-side talk. So with Afghan Taliban. And so Afghan Taliban made it very clear, if China joined the peaceful talk, they will come. Because China never fight in Afghanistan. And another one is risk in legal affairs. China law, nothing to do with any laws along the Silk Road countries. Okay, I'm coming to the end. Another risk is political risk. Political risk because most of the countries have unstable regime. Even they have mature democracy like in Bangladesh. Whenever a new leadership come to power, the Chinese merchant investor must have good relation, give them soft money to guarantee their investment, security. And so this kind of thing happen all the time. And also financial risk. And some of the countries along Belt and Road do not have trust. And there are some crises of sovereign debt crisis. Next one. And so last point is people outside China concerned about. China now doesn't know how to do its own propaganda of Belt and Road. If you read the Chinese language newspaper, it sounds like China is the chief architect of Belt and Road. And the only financial supporter of the Belt and Road. And also the total constructor of the construction of Belt and Road. So that doesn't look good. And that will make people think that it is really a new colonialist. And so I propose that Belt and Road should be a road leading to a common prosperity for all countries along Belt and Road. And it should be the road of peace leading to peace. And it should be a green road, environmental friendly. And it should not be a burden for the country a financial burden for the country along Belt and Road. And not only a good business opportunity for big enterprises, but also for small and middle businesses. And all this, to answer all these questions concerned, China must use its action to answer this. I think this is the last point. Can you go to the last one or no more? Okay, this is something useful information. If you want to go to have a study of the Belt and Road country like this, I took my student to Uzbekistan. 26 years ago, I went to Central Asian Republic, the 5 republics. I don't need any visa. I just have a passport. Because Soviet Union did not, want Chinese to have visa. You're free, go there with passport. But now I have 12 visas to visit Uzbekistan. Every night I have to go to police station to get a visa. Because I change hotel every night. And if I change hotel, I have to go to police station to get a visa. And upon my departure, if the custom officer found I lose one of the visas, I would be fined like 1,000 US and 15 days in prison. Yes. Next. And another thing is that it's difficult to have people-to-people contact. I took my student to a village in Tian Shan Mountain in Uzbekistan, and the local people are the Muslim people who fled China in the Qing dynasty, and they learned that their country people came to the mountains. They're so happy. They organized a tea party for us. Then half an hour later, the police surrounded our meeting place and drove away. Okay, so it's not that easy. Next, and some of the connection we have. China has been negotiating with Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan many years, almost 20 years, but still the railway not built between Xinjiang and Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. Next. And also last picture, this is the Wuhan Corridor. Wuhan Corridor, the CNN, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, and the Chinese CCTV all depicted as the most terrible place. But actually, I took my student and going to the frontier and to the border line between China and Afghanistan. And the Chinese soldier guarding the border told me that they didn't see a single terrorist in the last 15 years. The country has a jail. That is the only jail which doesn't have a prisoner in China, in Wuhan Corridor. And and Marco Polo came to China through this, Xuanzang and Oro Stein came to China through this corridor. And we don't have this color Kunlun, this snow mountain. We have this very good, very smooth and flat land, but because the people, the media mediated terrorism. And so we could not build a corridor through here. I think this is the last one. Okay, next. This is the existing railway between Pakistan and Iran, but useless. So if we utilize the existing one like Siberia, we could save a lot of money like that. And that one, the smuggling road from Kandahar in Afghanistan to Karachi and carrying all the stones to China. I took all these pictures. Next. Okay, that's the last one. If you WeChat, you just scam me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. President Franklin Roosevelt, working with Harry Hopkins, Francis Perkins, Henry Wallace, and others, put millions of Americans to work in what Roosevelt called the New Deal. Recently, the spirit of FDR reappeared in the form of the government of Egypt, which has accomplished something which was considered by many people to be impossible. Here to tell you how the apparently impossible was done in record time is Ambassador Ahmed Farouk, the Consul General of Egypt in New York. Please join me in welcoming him.
Good morning, distinguished guests. Initially, I would like to thank Schiller Institute, presented by Mrs. Helga Zepp-Larouche, the founder of the institute. And I would like to acknowledge the role of economist Lyndon LaRouche, the founder and editor of Executive Intelligence Review, for convening this important conference. My remarks today will be very brief about the history and the new initiative of the Silk Road, and I will focus on the project of the Suez Canal in Egypt, which is connecting this Silk Road east and west. First, the history. Throughout history, humans have always moved from place to another, exchanging goods, skills, and ideas. Eurasia remains always the crisscross for communication routes and paths of trade, which gradually known as the Silk Roads. The history of these routes can be tracked back thousands of years. Egypt, with its approximately 7,000 years of history, has long been at the center of global commerce and at the axis of trade routes linking Asia, Europe, and Africa. Two branches of the old Silk Road intersected Egyptian maritime and caravan routes. The new Silk Roads. Recently, there were many attempts to reviving the ancient Silk Road. Along the most recent prominent attempt came from China. When the Chinese president formally announced in 2014 the Silk Road Economic Belt and subsequently expanded the program to include the Maritime Silk Road. The program aims to unlock massive trade potential and bolster economic development to the so-called belt. The project consists of two main components: the land-based Silk Road Economic Belt and the Maritime Silk Road. The first one linking China with Europe through Central and Western Asia, and the second one, the Maritime, designed to connect China with Southeast Asia and Africa and Europe. Egypt is playing a main role in that belt due to its geographic strategic location as a land bridge between Asia and Africa and a link between two principal waterways, the Mediterranean Sea and the Indian Ocean. Inevitably makes it a pivotal country on the crossroads between Asia, Africa, and Europe, and an important partner for the major and emerging powers. On January 2016, this year, Egypt and China signed a memorandum of understanding on the new Silk Road Economic Belt and the 21st century Maritime Silk Road. Now I will go to the Suez Canal, the new Suez Canal project, the magic word of the international commerce. It is recorded that Egypt was the first country to dig a man-made canal across its lands with a view to activate the world trade. The idea of linking the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea by a canal dates back to 40 centuries. When the Suez Canal was inaugurated in 1869, it changed the course of global transport by shortening the route between Europe and Asia approximately 7,000 miles, which made it the shortest link between East and West. For Egypt, the Suez Canal is it's not only a national asset. It is a natural resource, a unique boon that generates steady income and ensures Egypt's international standing. And it's enough to know that 20%, approximately more than 20% of global shipping traffic pass through this canal. Bringing the 150 years old canal to the 21st century, President Sisi of Egypt on August 2014, launched this new Suez Canal mega project, involving an expansion of the existing canal and the development of its environs into a global trade hub. This expansion includes establishing a new parallel waterway approximately 35 miles long, in addition, deepening and widening another 35 miles of the existing canal, which is allow two-way traffic, and this cut the time of every vessel passing through the canal by half, from 22 hours to 11 hours. The new canal cost $8 billion US. $4 billion for the digging and the construction, and the other $4 billion to make underground and tunnels linking Sinai with the mainland of Egypt. The government invited Egyptian public to participate in this project through a tax-free investment certificates offered by the state-owned banks. The certificates, surprisingly and amazingly, sold out in less than 10 days, and the government generated the $8 billion in exactly 9 days. Principle behind the idea of the project, the new Suez Canal. Egypt need for a national project that supports the Egyptian economy. It making use of the existing potential to create a well-developed industrial zone. We need to provide job opportunities and creating new urban communities to attract youth and heavy populated areas to the canal zone, gaining from the growth of the world trade in places such as China, Southeast Asia, and India, going to Europe, to USA via the Suez Canal. Since the project began, more than 43,000 Egyptians are working in this project. They moved in total 500 billion cubic meters of earth. And this in Egypt, the measures in Egypt, we say it's equivalent 200 Great Pyramids in 1 year. The new canal inaugurated in August 2015, it expects to increase revenues from about 5.3 billion a year, 2015, to 13.2 billion in 2020. The new canal project goes side by side with the Suez Canal Area Development Project, a development zone, which will turn Egypt into international logistics center. The new industrial zones aim to develop over 400 square miles, including 6 ports on the Mediterranean Sea and the Gulf of Suez, to provide a service hub centered on the canal activities. It is expected to add about 1 million new jobs for the Egyptians and the Middle Eastern, particularly focused on youth, and support the local economy. The Suez Canal Corridor Development Project is a centerpiece of an aggressive development perspective with implication for all Northeast Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Maritime Silk Road. It is a message of hope for a better future to the youth and the coming generation in Egypt, Middle East, and Africa, aiming for a better understanding, more tolerance, and a peaceful coexistence. Thank you. Allow me now to just show a very brief movie about the mega project of the Suez Canal, and it explain much better the project. Thank you.
over 150 years, the Suez Canal has been the lifeblood of Egypt's economy. In August 2014, President Sisi launched the Suez Canal expansion project. A mega development to construct a new 72-kilometer-long canal which will allow for two-way traffic. The project will increase the canal's capacity and will maintain the Suez Canal's position as a major maritime trade route against increased competition globally. This audacious project is on schedule for completion and has been entirely funded by the Egyptian people. Over 64 billion Egyptian pounds were raised through investment certificates, a true testament to the country's resilience and its willingness to invest in its future. The new Suez Canal will provide the springboard for a major economic transformation that will begin with the development of the Suez Canal zone. The SC zone is strategically located astride the world's major shipping lanes and seeks to take advantage of Egypt's proximity to major global markets and the abundance of land and human resources to develop one of the world's most dynamic trade, logistics and manufacturing centers. The SC Zone provides investors with a competitive platform to access over 1.6 billion customers globally under preferential trade agreements. We believe that we can build on our strong ties with our existing trading partners to develop further areas of opportunities and increase Egypt's share of international trade. With a large and growing population of nearly 90 million people, and with rising living standards, the domestic market also provides strong opportunities for investment. Our vision is to transform the SC Zone into a world-class global logistics and industrial processing center that serves global markets and to create sustainable and high-quality jobs for the Egyptian people. Our aim is to create 1 million new jobs over the coming 15 years. The SC Zone offers investors opportunities across all economic sectors. In the maritime sector, there are many opportunities available in the development of ports and container terminals, logistics and distribution centers, as well as shipbuilding and ship repair. The outlook for the manufacturing sector is equally promising, with opportunities in a wide range of industries such as pharmaceuticals, food processing, automotive, textiles, and consumer electronics. With a fast-flowing ICT industry in Egypt, the SC Zone is the right place for new businesses and initiatives to grow and utilize the Egyptian talent pool. The SC Zone is also well placed for the development of renewable and clean energy projects. To achieve our vision, the SC Zone will create a new investor-friendly environment, which will be a blueprint for future development nationally. Investors will benefit from a true one-stop shop with highly efficient and streamlined procedures to ensure smooth business operations. In developing our regional strategy, we have considered the main development nodes along the Suez Canal. These are linked to Cairo via a series of expressways. A new expressway and road and rail tunnels will also provide access to East Port Said, with international links provided by Cairo Airport and potentially Port Said Airport. Within the SC Zone, a number of existing large-scale industrial sites can form a basis for future development, such as 10th of Ramadan Industrial City and the proposed new administrative center. Primary development centers lie along the Suez Canal corridor. In the south, the industrial complex at Ain Sukhna will build on the existing economic zone and port. In the north, East Port Said Port will grow as a global transshipment hub supported by a large new logistics and industrial area. Links to the interior will be enhanced with the extension of the inland ring road to Ain Sokhna and to a major new dry port near 10th of Ramadan, as well as by rail to East Port Said. Cross-canal connections are also under construction to open up the Sinai region. Over the coming 15 years, 3 major economic nodes will have evolved, linked to Cairo and each other by high-quality transport infrastructure. In the longer run, the development emphasis will shift to east of the canal and along the inland ring road. SC Zone is not only about investments and jobs. It is also about integrated, sustainable communities where people want to live and work. The private sector will play an important role in supporting the development of these communities. Finally, the General Authority for the Suez Canal Economic Zone has the support of the government, the business community, and the people of Egypt. We are looking for partners to join us. We have listened to stakeholders from all parts of Egyptian society and the international community, and believe we have created a framework in which all parties can participate meaningfully in ushering in a new and prosperous future for Egypt.
United States troops have been stationed in Korea since 1950. There are still about 28,000 US troops there. Korea is still divided. Why? With the possibility of Russian, Chinese, and American cooperation never being more obvious than there, would not the reunification of Korea, like the reunification of Germany, be a possible opportunity for a new era in world diplomacy? The next speaker offers a perspective for unification, peace through development. Please welcome me and join me in welcoming Professor Jae-Pung Ryu, retired from Loyola College, who is the founder of the One Korea Foundation.
Thank you very much. I consider this to be quite an honor, personal and otherwise, to be invited to speak at this very important and timely Schiller Institute conference this year. The Helga LaRouche spoke of the need to go beyond the geopolitical considerations and polarity, and it's a very timely comment because it was the geopolitical considerations of the powers beyond Koreans' control that we were divided 71 years ago. It was a geopolitical consideration of disarming the Japanese Imperial Army, the north of the 38th parallel by Soviets who just entered the peninsula, and the south of the parallel by the United States forces, which came a little later. And we remained divided for 70 years, and the geopolitical consideration of the world continues to keep the peninsula divided, and it's about time to make some attention to that. The Attorney General Ramsey talked about many global issues, environment, poverty, income disparity, and so on. But standing with all of these problems is also that there is nobody really talking about this or thinking about this. We have a lot of problems, that's a problem enough, but nobody is really addressing it, makes it really depressing. And I admire the works of this Schiller Institute, and I hope to convey some ideas about Korea so that you can somehow find some link between what you are also after, that is a world land bridge, and how it might have some implications for and from and by Korean unification. Since my retirement 4 years ago, my time and attention has been devoted to Korean unification. This goal of Korean unification, however, is not like some other things I've done. It's not really goal-oriented endeavor. It is more direction-oriented endeavor. Because if I think, I'll be 75 years old this year in October. And if I have something like I want to see Korea united in my lifetime or in the next 5 years, it'll be too depressing to see the reality. The signs are too discouraging and frustrating that I may even actually give up before I start. I have to think about in terms of that there's a direction we want to move to, and I'll just do as far as I could go and let it stop there and let others follow and do along. So it's more like that, in that spirit I do what I do. Because once Korean unification is mentioned, in and out of Korea per se, there is a plethora, whole gamut of opinions. On the one hand, you have people who argue that unification is not desirable. Actually, status quo is quite beneficial. All the powers around it seem to think so. China intervened in Korean War out of geopolitical consideration of not having to face American forces across the Yalu River. And that continues to this day. Japan finds South Korea's emerging industrial power strong enough and rival enough. Unified Korea is not a welcome news. United States, too, do not find unification particularly desirable. And there's some sinister interpretation that there is a hidden hand on the United States who likes to keep Korea united, keep divided, so that Koreans can continue to buy arms, guns, and tanks. And there are people who make money from it. I don't know. I have never really looked into it. Actually, with all the scholarships devoted to it, there has been very little, any figures, numbers, or tables produced for that. So the rumor, whether it's really true or not, continues. And there are people who believe, especially comparing Korean situation to Germany, Korea has been divided for 70 years, but it's only since German unification the idea of Korean unification became a little more real to Korean people. But then when we compare East and West Germany to North and South Korea, the signs are more depressing. West Germany was much richer than South Korea. much bigger than East Germany, vis-a-vis East Germany to West Germany. It was 3 times the size. North and South Korea, land-wise, about the same. Population of South Korea, twice that of North Korea. So, much richer West Germany. A unification, East Germany and West Germany, people sent letters to each other. There were telephone calls. They exchanged Christmas cards. They visited each other. Nothing like that in Korea. The recent divided family, at one time, 10 million family, the individuals, about a quarter of that size of families, remain divided. And when they try to give them like 3-day reunion, it takes 3 years of preparation, and it's a terrible thing. Now, so when we compare Korea's situation to Germany, the idea is that we cannot afford it. West German economy suffered from it, and even today, even Germany, there are people called Ossis and Wessis, and there's a prejudice going on, and all the blames tend to be placed on something that went wrong through the unification process. Korea doesn't want to repeat that, and we cannot definitely, afford it. On the other side, there are people who believe that unification is not desirable because status quo is not too bad, not just internationally, but domestically also. South Korea was an impoverished nation. When I left Korea in 1965, income per capita was $100 per person. At the level of perhaps Uganda and Rwanda of Africa today, South Korea is by some measures, 10th to 14th largest economy of the world. Size half of Utah. It's a remarkable accomplishment. In post-World War II period, since 1945, South Korea is the only country that out of utter dirt poverty accomplished 2, industrialization and democratization. It's a proud heritage. But so now we can make a living. We don't have beggars anymore. We don't have starving people anymore. We don't have a budget that 60, 70% rely on American foreign aid. We give foreign aid. We help explore many parts of the underdeveloped world, Koika and others you might have heard. So we can now live, but now if Korea is somehow suddenly united, South Koreans are afraid, now we will have to guarantee the basic livelihood of 25 million people. We can't afford that. There are people who believe we cannot afford that. Status quo is not so bad. On the other side, there are people who believe unification at all costs, no matter what. Even if it takes some bloodshed, unification is a must. Korea was always a unified country, one people, one land, and it must be put together again, But I don't belong to either camp. I want to see, and One Korea Foundation I speak for, like a particular kind of unification. If Korea somehow united through military means, or through a sudden collapse of the Kim family, the dynastic regime, then the chaos would be such that there would be no force, no political or personal or leadership caliber that can possibly control this. So that without great preparation, very painful, gradual, solid effort on the part of both South Korea, closely supported and coordinated internationally, involving China and the United States, Japan and Russia, arguably 4 greatest powers of the world, Korean unification will not be possible. What kind of Korean unification we want? Korean unification must be done by Korean people. That we will not ask other people to do it. Although we were divided by others, we will unify ourselves. But we cannot do it alone. Definitely not. Especially if anyone is actively opposed to it. Even in a very illustrative, the presentation by Professor Lee of the Silk Road, there's one country that's not mentioned. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Tibet, Kazakhstan, Xinjiang, Tibet were mentioned, but not a word of Korea. China calls itself Middle Kingdom. And now in the Silk Road concept, it defines itself as if it's Far East, not the middle anymore. In order to be middle, it better include Korea. When Koreans think of unification, newspaper columnists, college professors talk about what unification will bring to Korea. Korea is a peninsula, but South Korea has been a virtual island, three-sided sea and the demilitarized zone. We have been living in an island for 70 years. So one dream for one Korea unification is somehow an idea that college freshmen and sophomore will take a backpack and get on a Siberian cross-continental Eurasian railroad and go all the way to Madrid, to Venice. And they get excited about that. This is one of the ingredients of the dream that is keeping unification alive in the minds of the young people in Korea. And Michael Billington was so good to have a copy of Declaration for Unification prepared for you. Do you all have it? I would be very honored if you spend some time to read it. It is not much of a document or literature perhaps, but it took me 7 months to write it, to revise it, to change every word. Every word, I must have spent hours on it. So just take some pity on me and take a good read. Now, the type of unification we want is not really that easy. It takes some very, very, very specific measures. We need to, when Korea is united, the basic idea is people will travel south in search of better living, standard of living. Money will travel north in search of profit. How many people will come down? How much money will go north? Is in kind of some mathematical equation. There is some formula there. For 10 years at least after unification, South Korea and North Korea must be run as two economic zones. Helmut Kohl of West Germany, who was at the time of German unification, made 3 mistakes, and they told us so. And we will learn a great deal from German experience, and hopefully will not repeat the same mistakes. One is that they equated the wage structure of East and West Germany and declared the Deutsche Mark of the two countries were of same value. And they made it, Helmut Kohl made it possible for West Germans who lost property in East Germany to reclaim it. They said in next 10 years after German unification, 230,000 lawsuits were filed in German court, so that to dispute, to settle it, Korea must not repeat that mistake. So we have to be very careful about this. The second is, this is a very tough call. We'll have to persuade the international community that for a 10-year period after unification, there should be a buy Korea policy. The infrastructure building of North Korea, building of power plants, railroads, roads, refurbishing harbors and so on, that resources, the hardware, the capital must come from South Korea. Otherwise, it'll be very, very difficult. The Korean economy is just not as big as Germany. We won't be able to sustain it. And there might be time, I may regret that I talked about unification, thinking, what we have brought here. I don't know if I'm making it. I think there was a time call, 3 minutes left. Okay. Okay, just one Korea Foundation at this time has a very limited purpose. Last year, in commemoration of 70th anniversary, we had held a big banquet at the Senate caucus room and held a big rally at Lincoln Memorial, whose legacy we want to borrow. With malice toward none, with charity for all. In his second inauguration address, that was the spirit we want to unify country. So one of the first efforts is we have to come to what we call AOL, American Opinion Leaders. And they are found in business world, in academia, in the press, and in business world. We would like to be a sort of top-notch website, sort of in the next couple of years or so that this is a site that these opinion leaders come to when questions about unification arise. And we want to redefine ROK-US alliance so that it will become security measures involving not just US-Korea, US Republic of Korea, US-ROK alliance is based on the idea that South Korea and United States will United States will come to defense of South Korea against North Korean aggression. It presupposes the division. The whole alliance is premised on the fact that the country will be divided and will continue to be divided. We must find, as Helga LaRouche pointed out, find a formula beyond that. US-Korea-ROK alliance should not be for defense only, but for one Korea, for Korean unification, a remodel that will set all others in a different type of framework, and will perhaps, I think the President Xi Jinping very much included Korea in his talk with President Park about his proposed new Silk Road. So they maybe next time Professor Lee will bring his 300 students to visit Korea, the easternmost end of the Silk Road, the World Land Bridge. So I think, in my view, the World Land Bridge start with the Korean unification. As some of my friends one time said, let there be peace on earth and let it begin here with us, with Korean unification. Thank you.
Okay, we'd just like to announce that there will be a press availability press conference at 2 p.m. If you need to have information about that, go to the registration desk and they can tell you. There will be people also at the exits that can help you. Now, secondly, we're going to extend our program by about 15 minutes, but only 15 minutes. We lost some time at the beginning. And I'm going to go to questions and answers just after we show the next item. We have a video message from Senator Mike Gravel. Some of you know who he is. He was responsible for the release of the Pentagon Papers in 1971, which revealed to the American people that its government knew that the United States was losing the Vietnam War, but refused to tell the people. And he believed that the people had the right to know. He could not be here with us today, but he sent this video message. Could we roll that now?
Let me congratulate, I want to congratulate the LaRouche organization for sponsoring this unusual conference, a conference on subjects that are vitally important to mankind. First off, of course, is going to be the treatment of the Silk Road. I've indicated in the past my views that the Silk Road is going to be the defining project of the 21st century. And what it's going to do is going to unify the economies of the world into one continuous path of communication, whether it's by ports, whether it's by high-speed rail, whether it's by roads, whether it's by the internet. This is the unifying force that that is being sponsored by this conference, and that's the reason why I congratulate the sponsors and I congratulate the participants. One of the issues that's going to be taken up with the second part of the conference, of course, is an effort to expand our activities in space. One encouraging factor is that the private sector has now got itself involved with space activities, and this would mean a great deal as they progress and are able to do this less expensively than the government has been doing in the past. But we need the government to weigh in on space exploration. This is the future of our planet, is in space. And so along with the Silk Road unifying the economic elements of the planet, we now have an effort that will reach out into space, and that will add to the unification within the planet and will add to the economic capability beyond the planet. And finally, the conference will be focusing on cultural matters, which is so difficult, so typical of the LaRouche organization, who has always developed a consciousness of music in our lives and in our spiritual beings. So again, I want to wish the conference in their deliberations a great deal of good luck, a great deal of effort in what they're undertaking. The Silk Road, the space exploration, and the cultural expansion beyond national boundaries. The Silk Road, in my mind, remains an opportunity for all nations, not only the BRICS, but all nations. And I hope and pray that the United States will eventually join this effort, because this effort is what will disarm the militarist in the future and will provide the economic wherewithal for all societies to prosper and to be able to take care of their own economies. Again, thank you for participating in the conference. I wish you well.
Okay, so we're going to go right to our question and answer period. It will be a bit foreshortened. We're going to have about 25 minutes for questions. Could you move the microphone to the middle? Fred, could you get the microphone and move it to the middle? So please, when you come to ask questions, please formulate them shortly. Don't give statements because we don't have time. Although, of course, if you want to speak to anyone individually on the panel, I'm sure that you can come up here and at least address some question to them at that point. So, and at the point that we conclude this 25 minutes portion, we do have an important video message from State Senator Richard Black of Virginia, which we are only changing the order of because we want to make sure some people are able to ask questions. Okay, so the microphones are open. You can go to either side and please address your questions in an efficient manner. Okay, sir?
Walid Fadama from National Association of Yemeni American. My friend Emma and Bill, they bring me, I came with them from Michigan. And I have a questions, but I want to say a couple words, please. Killing civilians in refugee camps and markets, schools, residents, and public places by Saudi-led aggression is a war crime and serious violation of the humanitarian and international convention. My question is, after all this, I know everybody is here, what's going on in Yemen over a year. Mr. Lee, he said, the Taliban, they bombing Buddha, but we have Muslims countries. They have a collision coming to bombing the Muslims country because they said they have some reasons. We are not Muslim, we are Shia. We are not Shia and Sunnah, this is a good reason. I want to ask, why the $1 billion they spent to destroy the Muslims countries and they killing the civilians people? Under what any kind of reasons? Why didn't they spend it like China, like Russia, like the other countries to build the countries and make the poor people to grow up and have the growth and living like the others, like them, like the royalty families? I am here to need some answer for these countries. Are they just having the money from the gas to just send them people to bomb themselves and killing the round of the world? From maybe 88 or maybe before, each bomb or suicides or anything or killing civilians, so any,
just let them
it's in Saudi Arabia country and royal family. Thank you.
So, yeah, it's not clear. The problem is that the speakers don't quite understand what your question is. If it seems to have been a statement, if you just could say something brief.
I will say my question. Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, they spend $1 billion to destroy the countries, the Muslims countries, Yemen, Libya, Syria, and others. With the collision of whole the world, they silent. Why they didn't spend the money for these countries to build and make the people to have the life like that family reality? Thank you.
All right. You have Michael Mark. Is he live?
No, this is not my, okay, yes. I attended meetings in Doha, Qatar twice over the last 3 months. The first meeting was actually attended by 3 countries, the United States, Russia, and China. And the American speaker was the former defense minister or former director of CIA. And I saw a big difference between the United States and China and the Russian policy about the Middle East. And the American, he's a former official, but anyway, he represented some of the voice in the government, that he wants to destroy Libya, Assad government. And but China and Russia don't want to have regime change. And my recent trip to Doha, it's a conference of the Middle East. And Iran did not come, Syrian government did not come, and all those representatives come to the meeting from the Middle East country want a regime change in Syria. So no one talk about the people, no one talk about how to bring peace to Syria. That's the problem. Okay.
Okay, what we're going to do, thank you. What we're going to do is we're going to take 3 questions, address your question to someone on the panel, not everybody. We're going to take 3 so that way 3 people here are ready to answer them, okay, in succession. Okay, so next.
Excuse me, I'm sick. So this is going to be really bad, but I have a question about the Korean unification. You talk about uniting South Korea, North Korea, and using the United States more than just a military force, but also as an economic backing. But you only mentioned Kim Jong-un once, and it leads me to believe that you're almost blatantly ignoring him. I don't know if that's on purpose or maybe he's irrelevant at this point, but it raises a comment on fascism in today. And I'm really wondering, does Kim Jong-un play a part in uniting Korea by taking him down or in any other means?
Okay, that's your question, okay? Next, over here, that microphone.
Okay.
Next question.
My question is directed to Helga, but others could jump in if we can. My question is, thank you for organizing this conference, and the specific question I have in mind is, how can we influence the United States to be more positive and participate in this land bridge and Silk Road project? I think that seemed to be very crucial for this ultimate success. So anyone with any specific ideas beyond just write a letter to Obama.
Okay, and that's the, okay, we'll take a third question here.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Les Jameson with hr14.org, and my question is to I'd say Attorney General Clark or Helga LaRouche. How do you see the role of the solving finally of the motivations and funding of 9/11, especially in relation to what this gentleman was, I think, asking about Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates? Instead of spending billions on building those economies, instead spending those billions on warfare, and the United States' role, I think, can be seen through our own suppression of evidence in 28 pages from the Congressional Joint Inquiry on 9/11. And if you can address that as linking the ways to move forward on world collaboration.
Okay, great. So those three. So, sir, Professor Rue. Okay, yeah, you take
the
you first.
gentleman's question about Kim Jong-un, does he matter, or do we ignore him completely? Of course he matters a lot. I mean, a lot depends on what he does. But our approach to Korean unification takes a two-track approach. One is government to government and the people to people. And we believe that the governments of North Korea are not particularly inclined for unification. Therefore, and actually it's been acting as a problem, not a facilitator for it. South Korea, through President Park's Dresden Initiative, which now has been kind of cut back after the recent fourth nuclear test and the second missile launching of this year, was very much like our approach, that we build North Korean infrastructure so that people of North Korea can have the basis, economic basis, skills, and the foundation on the basis of which they can develop their own living standard. So I hope that Kim Jong-un has a very, very important role, just to stay a little bit on the side so that people can do their work. And then don't worry about regime too much, because when economic situation develops to such an extent, let the people decide. They may choose Kim and we'll go along with it, although we have serious doubt about it. And then there was a question about the influence United States how can we influence United States to take a more sympathetic role for land bridge idea or Korean unification? I don't really know. But it is true, I have a very good friend who was a US ambassador to Mexico. I had a recent long conversation with him. He said after long experience, it is very unreasonable to expect United States government to address the issues that are important. They are always so busy to deal with issues that are urgent. The urgent always pushes out the important. Now, what does it take to change that? I don't really know.
But on the question of how to get the United States away from this imperial orientation and join the Silk Road, I said in the beginning of my remarks that that is probably going to be the question which will decide if humanity will exist. Because right now, we are on a course towards World War III. I only touched upon some of the crises, but that is a fact. You have a first use doctrine, the prompt global strike doctrine of the United States and NATO is a first use doctrine. The modernization of tactical and other, actually all nuclear weapon systems for $1 trillion in the next 30 years. Why do you do this? Why would you modernize your weapon systems if you're not in planning to use them? President Obama promised that he would work towards a nuclear-free world, for which he got the Peace Nobel Prize. People have short memories, so they forget these things. I think there are other candidates who have deserved the Peace Nobel Prize much more than President Obama. So I think, the only way how we are going to get a change in the policy is you and us, we have to mobilize the American people. Because, the United States, I don't know if you are aware of it, some of you may be, but the United States is undergoing right now a genocidal collapse, like Russia in the 90s under Yeltsin. I mean, it may shock you, but that is the reality, because in the 90s, the demographic curve of Russia collapsed by 1 million per year. The economy was shrunk to 1/3 in 4 years from 91 to 94. And, people in Russia remember this decade as a horrible, horrible decade out of which Putin slowly was able to bring Russia back to a better position. And what is the situation in the United States today? In all age brackets, white Americans have quadrupled their suicides since 2001. That is since George W. Bush came into office. And it continues to the present day with Obama. People are killing themselves because of heroin addiction, overdose, alcoholism, despair, depression. That is not exactly a sign of a prospering society. And I have said many times, the Americans remind me of the Germans, because in Germany, when you go out with a plan, we want to build the Silk Road into Southern Europe because Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, all these countries are collapsing. We must bring the Silk Road there. Then the German response is, oh, you can't do anything anyway. And I have already said, I want to put a fine of 10 years in dungeon. Because that sentence makes people so impotent, that they then become the slaves and the victims of whatever circumstances. And Americans are becoming like that. Americans used to be the can-do country. They used to say, yeah, sure, we can do it. We can go to the moon. We can develop Africa. We can do everything. Listen to the speeches of John F. Kennedy, where he said, the human being is capable of no limits. We can conquer any problem with technology and science. Where is this spirit? And I think that the purpose, as I said, of this conference and other conferences like that is we have to mobilize the American people that they know that there is an alternative. Because, when people don't think that there is any hope, that Wall Street is all powerful, that, there's nothing you can do, the election process is a laughing stock of the whole world by now, the outbreaks of Trump, people, they don't believe that this is possible in a civilized country. So, I think it's important that you help us to make known the fact that there is an absolute easy alternative. And it would be very easy. All the United States would have to do is convoke a summit, get on the telephone, call up President Xi Jinping, call up a couple of other leaders, General Assisi, Modi, who would be open, because Modi would and I know this because I was in India just 4 weeks ago, Modi would love to have the Chinese model in India. He really would like to do it. Why can he not do it? Well, because of democracy, or what people think is democracy. China has the advantage of having a meritocracy. That is a system where, basically people who have merit get into better positions. And, the fact that President Xi Jinping is now trying to get rid of some problems is just a healthy thing, because, people are happy that there is at least one country which is taking the leadership on new economic policies, and that is China. So India, on the other side, would like to have canals, corridors, but what happens is, since Modi is from the BJP, the Congress party immediately goes and organizes the farmers and says, no, you should not sell your land for this development corridor. And they're using it for stupid, narrow-minded reasons, like between the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States. That's why the country doesn't function. Everybody is just looking at their small-minded little project, and that way they stymie the development of the common good for the whole country. So what we need to do is, Lin at his 90th birthday made a beautiful speech, and he said, we should abandon the party system. Parties are something very, very dangerous. And that's what I think President George Washington said when he went out of office. He warned people. He said, look at what parties, when they become interest groups, will do to this country. Beware of it. So I really want to appeal to you, you have to become an activist, an organizer. You have to help us to build the Manhattan Project into a really powerful organization, and then have resemblance of that all over the United States, of people who say, we want work, we want jobs, we want to do what Egypt is doing. When have you seen a movie coming out of the United States like the promotion for the Suez Canal? I think the last time was with Kennedy, 50 years ago, or 52 years by now. So what we need to have is a mass movement for development. We have this pamphlet, maybe you can just show this. Yes, this pamphlet. This is a supplement of our World Land Bridge report, which, by the way, just to emphasize this again, is already now in English, in Chinese, in Arabic. The Egyptian transport minister was so kind to present this program about 2 weeks ago in an international press conference together with one of our representatives. And he said at that press conference that Egypt will commit $100 billion to building the Silk Road in Egypt. Now, we need people who say, this is the Silk Road for the United States. It has some concrete projects which can be and have been elaborated elsewhere already. How to build railway, how to build development corridors, how to build new science, how to get the United States space program to join with China, India, and Russia and ESA, rather than cutting it back, which we'll hear in the next panel. But we need a mass movement of people who fight for development of the United States. And then it is easy not to feel China rising as a competition. And the only way how we will survive, and I'm deadly serious, we are so close to World War III that if you think about it, you could not sleep. And just because people don't know about it and don't care about it doesn't mean it's not true. We could all be dead in a matter of hours or in a matter of days or weeks. The situation internationally is so tense. I only touched upon it a little bit, but it's much, much worse than most people have even an inkling from. So either we, in front of this very, very traumatic danger, mobilize every moral substance in this country to say, we do not want to be the cause of World War III. And remember, at the Nuremberg trial, which was basically, judging the Nazis having caused tremendous horrors in the Second World War, the judges said the excuse of people that they didn't know was not valid. The ruling of Nuremberg was they knew or should have known. So, there is no excuse for Americans that they didn't know or they should have known, And I can only appeal to you, become a peace movement, become a mass movement for development. The whole world is looking at us, at you. You know, the rest of the world has problems, many problems, but they are not an existential threat. The United States right now is an existential threat.
The pamphlet and the report are available at the literature table, and everyone who does not have it should get it there. That's number one. Number two, I understand that there are several people from the diplomatic community here, and so that I'm clear, the time of the press availability at 2 o'clock, you were definitely invited to that. That may also facilitate some questions that some people individually may have here. What we're going to do is we're going to take 3 questions of the 3 individuals there. I have not forgotten the question that was asked about 9/11. Helga, I talked to Ramsey, and he preferred that you start off in the answer, which was about the 28 pages, and then he'll add something to that.
Well, it is a known fact that the only reason why we have ISIS and before Mujahideen, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, and all of these organizations is because there was a very unholy and is a very unholy alliance between the British monarchy and the Saudi royal family. And that has been condoned by all administrations from the United States, going back to Brzezinski, because it was Brzezinski in '75 who said, let's use the Muslim card against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. So the problem was, when the Soviet Union disintegrated, these networks, which had been used by the United States, by the British, they didn't disappear. They distributed themselves to Dagestan, to Tajikistan, to Pakistan, and all over the place. And they have been used continuously for geopolitical reasons, for regime change, against Saddam Hussein, against the attempt against Assad, the killing and barbarian murder of Gaddafi, the destabilization and murder of people in Yemen right now. I mean, this is an atrocity the world doesn't talk about. Children are being killed every day in Yemen. You know, and this is a complete horror show. So, you know, the 9/11 question in this context pertains to the fact that the 9/11 Commission, led by Senator Bob Graham, made a report, and 28 pages of this report were classified until the present day. Now, a whole number of congressmen, including Walter Jones, Messi, various others, have read these 28 pages, and they came to the conclusion there is nothing in these 28 pages which deserves to be secret, because it's a cover-up of illegal activities and not national security. So there is a big demand that these 28 pages should be published, and then you would start coming to the roots of what went wrong with September 11th. And all the people, including Senator Bob Graham, have said, you know, that the role of the Saudi royal family is very, very big in that. And that is right now what makes the peace in Syria very fragile, because Turkey also is still supporting ISIS. So this is a very urgent question, and it needs to be addressed. You want to add something? No.
Okay, we're going to leave it alone. Great, fine. So next 3 questions, I think we go here first.
Hi, my name is Aaron from Montreal, Canada. I just want to say, first of all, that I'm honored to be here to speak to you in person.
Speak up a bit.
Is it on? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I want to ask a question about culture and the spirit of humanity, in particular, as you said before in your speech, agape, and one of the attributes of agape being immortality. How do individuals within the organization go out and organize in such a way that, for lack of better words, to almost save the next generations, and in particular my generation, from a certain degenerative education system and cultural system?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Question over here. And please indicate to whom it is directed.
Okay. Yes, my name is Boots Whitlock. I'm from New York City. And this question is directed to the panelists from China, Egypt, and Korea. What is your vision of the new Silk Road in respect to the World Wide Web or cyberspace? Thank you.
Okay. Third question.
Bing-Jin Lee from People's Daily in New York City. My question is to Professor Lee. And you mentioned in your the presentation that there are some more problems and the challenges along the Belt and Road programs. And what should China do before these programs starts?
Okay.
For example, we understand that there are severe competition in the bid for a bullet train in the Indonesia, in Thailand, and also elsewhere in the world. And do we need a kind of broader collaborations or, for example, the multilateral cooperation in these programs? Thank you.
Could we reverse the order of the questions? Good. Mr. Lee, you go first. You go first.
I just answer the last question. What China can do to handle these challenges and the concerns. One solution is China should build a culture sphere or a culture belt parallel to the economic belt. Like in what happened in Myanmar, it's nothing to do with money. We found actually China has a big investment in Myanmar, in hydropower station, in port, and in railway and highway. But when Myanmar had this election, and before the election, Hillary Clinton went to Myanmar, and also Japanese did something, but they know how to use politics to give pressure to the Myanmar politician. So the Myanmar canceled China's big project. And when Myanmar had a new president, a new government, the new government want to have economic development. So they just started talking with China. So during the failure or the lesson from Myanmar that China should have more cultural influence. That's not a good word anyway, but should work together with the local people, like NGO, the local media, and the university, like what American government is doing in China, to influence the people of those countries, to win the heart and mind of people. So people would not pressurize their own government leader to cancel and dismiss China's projects. That's my answer.
Great. Go ahead.
The gentleman from Canada asked a question about culture, and it's not very clear, but I guess you were asking the role of culture for land bridge project?
No, it was more of a general. I'm getting at the idea of agape and its immortal qualities and how we can continue essentially this mission into the next generations, and in particular.
As I was listening to Professor Lee's presentation and the Consul General's presentation, I was reminded of my visit to Cairo and also Xi'an, and there was a parallel. If you go to Xi'an, that Banpo Museum, there is one place where they show the living community of a prehistoric days, like 10,000 years ago. People were horticultural days, not before agriculture. The village was divided into three parts. People where people lived and made a living and ate their food and played. And there's a second area was the people who were buried. The living and dead were very closely proximal living. And the third place is the place where they made pottery. It was very interesting. And because when they had begun to have some surplus grain, the protecting that surplus from the mouse, from the weather and others was such an imperative They took it like they welcomed it like we welcome, anything in today's world. When I went to Cairo, the museum in Cairo, tour guide was a University of Cairo archaeological student, and she said, this is a prehistoric times. It predates Marco Polo, it predates Tang Dynasty, and the visit of the Chinese priest, the monk to visit India. It was days of Akhenaten. It's like a father of Tutankhamun era. There was a China from China. That's how China country got its name, the country that produced China. But anyway, this sort of a cultural affinity, cultural longing kind of predates anything historical or any particular, let alone just geopolitics or nation states. So I think it's addressing to culture, the depth from which the cultures emerge. And people begin to see that. I think we will, so in summary, I guess, the further cultural education, and people learn and travel and find out what everyone else is like, and begin to enjoy it and appreciate it and admire it. I think it's a way to peace. I don't know what else I can say to that. There's a cyberspace question about that, and every kind of development sharpens the division of people between gender or between educated and uneducated, rich and poor, and so on. This cyber technology seems to deepen and make it wider, the gap between generations. Because this time, I think young people, older people, middle-aged people, that divide is even greater than any divide that I can think of, even more than race or nationality. So we must find ways to start some meaningful, realistic dialogue across generations.
I would just like to add, I mean, there are many things one can say to young people who are suffering from a very degenerated culture. I mean, the youth culture in the United States and in Europe right now is totally satanic. And people have gotten accustomed to things which, if you would have met these things 50 years ago, if you were alive then, you would say, this is completely disgusting, this is satanic, this is horrible. But now, Pussy Riot is being upheld as an American value. Why? Because it's against Putin. So all of these things have become so, most of the pop music is satanic. And every time you think the bottom has been reached in terms of perversion, they come up with something even worse, So it's like the frog in the hot water, you're getting boiled and you don't even notice anymore that the culture becomes more satanic by the day. So the antidote against that is exactly what you said. If, for example, when I was in Lanzhou 2 years ago at the old Silk Road, we met with a couple of students, Chinese students, and we got in a very good discussion about the new Silk Road. And they said, yeah, we want to go to Africa and help to develop Africa with the new Silk Road. And that is the spirit young people should have, because young people, at least in my generation, when I could leave school, when my school was finished, I wanted to see the world. I wanted to go to every country, and I traveled to many. I traveled really a lot in my whole life. And the more you learn to know about these other cultures, the more you get excited, because you realize the world is indeed very beautiful, as Ramsey was saying. The world is a very beautiful place. And the fact that there are so many cultures is an enrichment, because you study Chinese painting or Chinese poetry and you realize they have a completely different way than, let's say, European, Italian, German poetry, but it's enriching. Or you go to Egypt and you find out, oh, wait a second, monotheology was really discovered in Egypt by some old pharaohs in a very ancient period of Egyptian history. Then you go to India and you find out that in the Vedic writings, there are mythologies about the creation of the universe, which our scientists today can confirm. And all of these things, there are so many things to discover. And, you know, the agape, the love for other people, comes from knowing them. If you don't know them, then you're fearful. You know, then you are like Trump, you know, a brute, a complete brute. He doesn't know anything, so therefore he says sentences which are on the level of a two-class pupil, you know, at best, if he has a good day.
If I may comment on this point of different of culture, I will. Good.
It's on now.
Yeah, it's on. Thank you. Egypt. If I may comment on this point of different of culture, I will take it from the perspective of Egypt. Me as an Egyptian lived in Egypt, and we get used to have this different culture in Egypt. At the beginning of the 20th century, for example, when the First World War started in Europe and the Second World War, Egypt became the safe haven of many European communities. And they moved to Egypt with their families, with their businesses, with their cultures, with their different backgrounds. And they used to live in Egypt and melting with the Egyptian society. And from that point, we realized in Egypt that the more different of cultures, the more diversity, the more progress, and the more having open mind. That's the Egyptian society. We are not in competition with each other, but we are just completing each other the more we have different of culture. And that's explained when, I don't want to talk about politics, but that's explained why the Egyptian people revolt in 2013 against the Muslim Brotherhood when they tried to change the root of the Egyptian society, the root of the Egyptian culture, taking to a different direction. The people revolt against this, and we want to keep Egypt as it was along its long history, a point where the different of cultures melting together for the benefits of humanity. Thank you.
Okay, that's going to conclude our session. Whoop, 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 whoop. Don't move, don't move. What's going to happen is that we have our speakers who have press availability. So, Alvin, why don't you come down? And what we have to do right now is the following. We have a tape from State Senator Richard Black. I'm going to show that to people. Then we're finished. And at that point, we're going to have what will be a 35-minute break. All right? You got to do it that way. We're going to start at 2:35 p.m. because we've got a live webcast and we can't be any later than that. We'll also have some messages. I'll read a couple of greetings at 2:30, but at 2:35, we have to begin our second panel. So can we roll the Richard Black tape?
Well, I'm Senator Dick Black, State Senator of Virginia. I have a long military history, fought with the 1st Marine Regiment in Vietnam and also flew helicopters on quite a number of missions. So I'm very pro-military, but at the same time, I have very deep reservations about what we're doing in Syria. So I'd like to talk with you. Welcome to the Schiller conference, and I'd like to just give you a rundown on where we stand today and kind of how we got there. Syria is the essential nation in the Middle East because everything revolves around Syria. And this is a brief countdown to the Syrian war, and there are things that preceded it, obviously. But I wanted to start with 2001. In 2001, the Pentagon started war planning to topple the Syrian government. Wesley Clark said that after the 9/11 attacks, he was in the Pentagon, visited with the Secretary of Defense, and then he went and he spoke with a friend of his who was a general, and the general said, boss, he said, you got to look at this. I said, what is it? he said, we're going to attack Iraq. And General Clark said, why? He says, have we found something on weapons of mass destruction? The general said, no. He said, it looks like we just figured we've got a great military and we got a problem and we're going to do something with it. About a month later, General Clark goes back in and he looks up this same general. He says, is this still on? Are we still going to attack Iraq? And the general said, hey, it's worse than that. And he pulled up a sheet of paper. He says, we've got plans now to topple seven governments in the Middle East. Now, one of them was Syria. One of them also was Libya, which ties in with Syria. So I want to discuss both. But in any event, the war planning clearly had begun in 2001. Now, what's important about 2001? Well, the Syrian war did not begin until 10 years later. There were no uprisings in Syria. The Syrians were prosperous. It was one of the most prosperous nations in the Middle East, one of the most advanced. Syria had the greatest women's rights and the greatest religious freedom of any of the Arab nations. Think about that. Here we've demonized Syria, and yet they were the nation that had genuine freedom relative to all of the other Arab nations. So we begin war planning in 2001. WikiLeaks did a tremendous service, I think, to all of us when they released some of the diplomatic communiques out of the Syrian embassy. A communique from the U.S. Embassy in 2006 described a detailed plan for destabilizing and undermining the Syrian government. The year 2011 becomes a very terrible year in Mideast history. This is when the so-called Arab Spring starts in Tunisia, and then all of a sudden unrest spontaneously occurs in so many countries, as it often does when covert operatives go to work. The United States, Britain, France took the lead, working together with Turkey and with Qatar, and we promoted the Libyan uprising. Now, why did we do this? Colonel Gaddafi had become the principal ally of the United States in the war on terror in North Africa. We had had our problems with him, to be sure, but they had been settled. We'd normalized relations. We went in there, and with the great help of Senator John McCain, we declared that there would be a no-fly zone. Now, a no-fly zone is a strange name for a free-fire zone, but that's what it is. It's a free-fire zone where you go in and you literally bomb everything to smithereens. That's what we did. By the time that we were finished in Libya, there essentially was no government, there was no culture, there was nothing. Everything was destroyed, except for the Libyan arms supplies. Colonel Gaddafi had a vast supply of modern arms. The purpose in overthrowing Libya was to be able to take these advanced weapons from Libya, send them through Turkey into Syria to overthrow Syria. And this was their way of getting around having to go to Congress for appropriations and to say, hey, look, Congress, let's go in and let's attack an allied nation, a neutral, non-belligerent country, and murder its leader. What do you think? I don't think they'd have gotten very far. It's much easier to simply stage a covert operation. And so that's what happened there. This is the outline of where we were, how we got there. So the Syrian war is often presented as a domestic uprising, an uprising of people who wanted freedom and democracy. A defense intelligence agency study that was commissioned by the Joint Chiefs of Staff determined that this is essentially a myth, this idea of moderate rebels. It has always been a myth. The Syrian rebels were heavily infiltrated and controlled by the terrorists from the very beginning. Now, what I'd like to do is go beyond that. If you go back to early in 2015, what had happened is the Turks and the Saudis had teamed up and they had formed something called the Army of Conquest. The Army of Conquest was based and centered around al-Nusra. Al-Nusra is Al-Qaeda in Syria, and Al-Qaeda, you'll recall, is the group that killed 3,000 Americans when they attacked the Twin Towers and the Pentagon on 9/11. So Turkey and Saudi Arabia put together this army of conquest based on the very people who carried out the greatest attack ever on the American homeland. Turkey runs along the northern border of both Syria and Iraq. Now, what this map shows you here, the green portions are now controlled by the Kurds. You recall the heroic battle at Kobani. Now, I have spoken to Kurds who were present on the Turkish side of the border. The Turkish army had protected the border with tanks. They put 50 tanks. During the Battle of Kobani, the Turks brought convoys of Red Crescent ambulances, which is like the Red Cross in the Middle East. And they loaded them with ISIS jihadis, and they used the ambulances, which the Kurds obviously would not fire on, and they used them to carry ammunition and fresh troops into battle for ISIS. So this was going on. Well, what happened is the Kurds finally managed to get the best of ISIS. They conquered ISIS, and rather than simply securing Kobani, they began to attack. And they began to move all the way across the border, and they began to seal it and to cut off access to Turkey. Now, what this did is it threatened to totally block access from ISIS. Now, the number one ally of ISIS is Turkey. Turkey provides them with all of the arms, with all the ammunition, with hospitals to treat their wounded. They have regular routes where jihadists come in from all over the world who are recruited. They pay various rebels, both in Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Now, Turkey supplies the Army of Conquest, which is Al-Qaeda based, through this gap over here, which they have opened up. And but this Kobani gap is where ISIS is supplied. Now, if you look at the gray area is held by ISIS. ISIS has, or they did have, 1,200 oil tankers that were running oil through the Kobani Gap. 44,000 barrels of oil a day were transiting through there. And unlike the typical border controls that Turkey has over things flowing through, they waved the oil through. They knew what that was, and they knew where it was going. And it was going on the market, and they paid good money to ISIS. This was probably the major single source of financing for ISIS. But it wasn't the only one. The ISIS terrorists captured the wonderful, beautiful city of Palmyra, which was one of the architectural treasures of the world. They began to loot, and the looted material was sent up through the Kobani Gap and then marketed in Turkey. Additionally, in Mosul, in Iraq, where the ISIS troops had seized. This is a city of 1 million, and so they had seized major hospitals, and they forced the doctors to do live removal of human body parts, and they would be packed in ice and shipped again through the Kobani Gap and sold on the market through Turkey and also through Saudi Arabia. A tremendous amount of money in live body parts, because they could literally select the size. If you had a child, you could get a child's organs. There were various reports of Iraqi doctors who were beheaded for refusing. They simply refused to open up live children and extract their organs. But this is the type of trade that our good allies, our NATO allies, Turkey. Turkey is essentially an organized criminal enterprise. This is how they function. This is how they fund themselves. The president of Turkey, President Erdogan, has not now won total control of the parliament, and they're going to rewrite the constitution. He has declared that he wants powers similar to those of Adolf Hitler. We are now fighting alongside, in a coalition, with a man who says that he wants the powers of Adolf Hitler. And so, as we negotiate for peace in Syria today, we have a spider on one side and a scorpion on the other. And those are Turkey and Saudi Arabia, two of the most vile dictatorships in the world. The Turks have a long history of murdering Christians in the Armenian genocide. They're now killing off Kurds within Turkey. The Kurds are about 20% of the Turkish population. We have Saudi Arabia, which has absolutely no freedom whatsoever. Women are viewed as total property, and there still is slavery that goes on. They officially abolished slavery in 1962. But it still goes on to some extent, even to this day. So those are our grand allies, the ones that we think we should rely on to improve Syria. The Russians, in what can only be described as an absolutely heroic act on the part of President Putin, moved in with a relatively modest military force. They attacked the oil supply. They began driving back the army of conquest and shrinking them in this area. They began bombing around Aleppo, the major industrial center of Syria. Everywhere, the rebels, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, are falling back on every single front throughout the country. So in summary, I would simply say, what would end this war? If we want this war to end, and it is essential to American vital interest in the Middle East that Syria survive and that the terrorists be defeated, the way to do it is to cut off the TOW anti-tank missiles that we're continuing to send in, and we're allowing the Saudi Arabians and the Turks to send in. We must restore peace to the Middle East. Syria is the key to doing it. When this war ends, this tremendous wave of jihadist activity across the globe will begin to subside. And it's going to be essential that as it does, we start putting the thumb on Saudi Arabia, which is exporting this Wahhabist, poisonous breed of Islamic radicalism, which is causing literally thousands of attacks across the globe monthly. on a monthly basis. It's a remarkable number. And so we've got to stop the terrorism, and the place to start is in Syria. So thank you very much for listening, and we hope that you enjoy the Schiller Conference.
Okay, very good. So our next session will convene at 2:35. For those who need information on it, get out there. You'll get other things. We'll see you back here then.